Hello, good evening, and welcome to the evening session of day 3 of Tamil Heritage Trust Indology Festival 2022. This Indology Festival, again, thank you for continuing to follow our programs over the last 2.5 days. We hope that you continue to participate in all our events until the end of Monday, which is our day 5. This Indology Festival is essentially a celebration of the temple builders of medieval India. So we are specifically focusing between the various dynasties and the art that they produced, ruling from different parts of India between the 8th and the 13th centuries. This is a 5-day festival, and we have over 14 lectures covering various dynasties, small and big, well-known and lesser known, that ruled different parts of India during this 8th to 13th century. Just to recap, we started this festival on the 2nd of June. We had Dr. Keshavan Velutat give us his keynote address, followed by Dr. Chitra Madhavan, who spoke about the Imperial Cholas and their art. On day 2, we had Sri Sita Raman talking about the later Pandya art and in terms of temple architecture, how they varied from the Pallavas and Cholas. This was followed by a lecture by Dr. Manjari Bhalerao, who spoke about the Gurjara Pratiharas and the art, the monuments that they produced in the central part of India predominantly and some parts of Rajasthan. Today we have 4 lectures. This morning we had 2 lectures. The first one by Dr. Kumud Kanitkar, who spoke about the Shilaharas and the temples that they constructed, particularly in the northern Konkan region. Followed that, Dr. Sudeepa Ray Bandyopadhyay spoke about the architectural activities under the Pala Sena dynasty in the eastern part of India. This is predominantly in the Bihar and the Bengal regions. So welcome. All our programs continue to be on YouTube. So if you have missed any of our previous lectures over the last 2.5 days, please go ahead and watch them on YouTube. You can do so by going to YouTube and typing Tamil Heritage Trust. You can find not just the IndoFest programs, but pretty much all our programs that are available there. So with that, I'd like to welcome this evening's speaker. Our first speaker, Dr. Ajit Kumar. His topic is the salient features of temple building in Kerala. Dr. Ajit Kumar is the founder head of the Department of Archaeology, University of Kerala. He was the chairman of the Department Council, chairman of Doctoral Committee, chairman of Board Studies, and a board member of the Faculty of Social Sciences and Academic Council, and also Senate member. He was the director of the School of Social Sciences and professor and head of the Department of Archaeology before his retirement in March 2020. He has published over 100 research papers, has written 9 books and 6 volumes of journals. Some of the books that are authored by him include Sculptural Art in Early Buddhist Cave of Western Maharashtra, Forts of Kerala, Petroglyphs and Pictographs in Kerala. He has also edited books that include Archaeology in Kerala, Emerging Trends, Harappan Problems, Harappan Culture Problems and Issues, Rock Art, Recent Researches and New Perspectives. He has organized various national and international conferences and workshops under his leadership. He has also participated and presented papers in various international and national seminars, conferences, and workshops. As part of his academic pursuits, he has visited countries like Sweden, Sri Lanka, Iran, China, and also countries like France, Germany, Italy, Switzerland, etc. He's a committee member of various archaeological art organizations like the Indian Archaeological Society, Delhi, Indian Society for Prehistoric and Quaternary Study, Pune, and Indian Art History Congress, Guwahati. He was a subject expert in archaeology with the UGC and National Testing Agency, New Delhi. He was listed in the panel of eminent archaeologists drawn by the Secretary, Ministry of Culture, Government of India. He was bestowed with the Academic Excellence Award 2020 by the University of Kerala. With these few words, I'd like to welcome Dr. Ajit Kumar to deliver his lecture.
Thank you, Dr. Kishore, for those kind words. So we start the presentation. Is it coming up?
Yes, sir. You can go to full slideshow mode.
I hope it's coming up.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, Vanakkam, Namaskar. My topic for today's talk is silent features of temples in Kerala. Temple building activity in Kerala or Malay Nat can be divided into 4 political periods, though the whole of Kerala was never governed by a single dynasty, and they remain largely a confederacy and alignment of the kith and kin of the Chera family. I say so because of the simple fact that in many inscriptions of the Pandyas and Cholas, you only come across the reference to Chera as a clan, and there are inscriptions which say that Cheras were defeated, but none of the individual kings are mentioned by name. Generally, they say that they had invited Malanad and defeated the Cheras, whether it was Ayas in the south or the other rulers who were ruling in central Kerala. The mention is generally stated as that they had defeated Cheras in Malanad. So I also use this particular term Cheras, and Chera does not refer to or in any way indicate to a single dynasty, but it's a confederation of alignment of the kith and kin in the Chera family. So I divide this particular temple building activity in Kerala, or where you can talk about the religious edifices in Kerala. I divide that particular whole period of Kerala's history into 4. One would be the pre-Chera period, which dates between 1000 BC and 4th century BCE. The second period would be the early Chera, also corresponding with the I, Venad, and Pandya periods, which I date somewhere between 4th century BCE and 7th century CE. And period 3 would include the later Chera or the Kulashekara or Perumal period, and also corresponding with I, Venad, and the Bushika period. This is tentatively placed between 7th, 8th, and 11th century CE. The 4th period includes the post-Kulashekara period or the later Chera period, as we call it, and it includes the Chola period, and also the posterior to the Chola period, we notice that 2 kingdoms rise up in Kerala. One is the Kolothunad, or the one governed by Kolathiri in the north, and there were 3 major Swarupams, which was Nediyaruppa Swarupam, which were the Zamorin, which ruled around the Calicut region, Perambadappa, which started off in Periyar Basin and then moved to Cochin, and Tripapur, which in the far south. We had 3 major Swarupams ruled, and there were also, this whole land was divided into 14 Nad between 12th and 16th century, and each Nadu was divided further into Desams, Kutams, and Kara. Now coming to the pre-Chera period, which I tentatively placed between 1000 BC and 5th century BCE, there existed habitation in Kerala during pre-Chera period is even beyond 1000 BC is confirmed from the C14 dates which we have obtained for megalithic monuments. And there is also a reference in Old Testament to the exchange of indigenous spices like cardamom, cinnamon between King Solomon and Queen Sheba, and the references to Ophir, which has been identified with Puar and South Kerala. And this reference in Old Testament seems to attest to contact between inhabitants of the 2 regions. The earliest form of worship among the indigenous population in Kerala was based on animism and spirit worship, as reflected from megalithic vestiges. Kerala had many indigenous variety of megalithic monuments, and some have also yielded cult figurines from them. Ancestor and spirit worship is also reflected in the Bhuta and Theyyam cult, which is prevalent in North Kerala, and some of the Bhuta or Theyyam forms finds representation in petroglyphs at Edekal rock shelter, which should have served as some form of pristine temple. I'm trying to indicate Edekal rock shelter, which I say would have served some form of pristine temple. The religious importance of Edekal and its divinities lasted over centuries, can be gleaned from inscriptions of the Chera king Atan, which is inscribed there, which dates to around 2nd, 3rd century CE in Tamil Brahmi. And there is also an inscription of Kadamba king Vishnu Varman dated to around 6th century. So all along between 2nd century CE or 3rd century, early 3rd century CE and all early 6th century AD, this particular rock shelter with its engravings of sort of divine beings were known to people, and that is why even the kings of that particular region put up inscriptions, put up their inscription in Edekal shelter. And while this was there, open air shrines, which is known as Kaava in the local parlance, encompassed of vegetative and folk deities like Yakshas, Yakshis, Nagas, Shasta, Bhagavati, etc. And some of these deities were not worshipped in iconic form, but they were worshipped formlessly as soil, undressed stones, and sometimes perishable icons of perishable material like wood or terracotta was also prevalent in such carve. There are also temples which developed on the same lines and where you don't have icon in the sanctum sanctorum, but in many cases it is only represented by either soil or a simple stone, continuing this very pristine tradition of open shrines like caves. Coming to megalithic monuments, there are some indigenous and some popular monument types which are noticed. We have the dolmens, and then we have rock-cut chambers or cyst as they are known as. We have also kodakals and also topicals. And apart from that, we have menhirs, which are large stone erections. And the most popular among them being the urn burial, which has got a larger distribution as far as Kerala is concerned. The most indigenous and the most intricately worked megalith in Kerala would be the rock-cut chambers. And these chambers are cut into laterite, which exist in the midland regions of Kerala. And rock-cut cells have been found from north Cochin area to up to Kasaragod region. And these particular lateritic rock has got a tendency to be softer while it is wet, or when there is more of humidity or water content in it. And as the water content dries up, it becomes more hardened. And you can notice that this is the entrance to a rock-cut chamber, and it probably imitates a wooden architecture. We have actually the door frames of typical timber structure also imitated in this lateritic medium. These rock-cut cells were of two types. Either they were surrounded by stone circles, and in the center would be the basic burial chamber beneath. There are two types of burial chambers. One is quadrangular with openings or cutting into side walls of the chamber, and into which actually are entered the sepulchral remains and as well as the funerary assemblage which is there. Some of these caves in the are circular in shape inside and also supported by pillars. So you notice that some of the earliest magico-religious or structures which are associated with the belief in life after death or spirit worship or ancestor worship are these megalithical monuments of Kerala. And some of these megalithical monuments continue to be worshipped even today. In the Idukki region, some of these they are worshipped as Karupuswami, and along the coastal belt, you notice that some of these menhirs are worshipped as Madan. Madan, actually, these are actually non-Brahmanical erections erected in the honor of the dead. But some point of time, these structures were popular. Since they were popularly worshipped, they also was assimilated into Hinduism or Brahmanism. So when they were assimilated into Brahmanism, this particular form or the menhirs were stated to be or identified with Madan. And Madan is considered as a son born to Shiva and Parvati. He was formless basically, and he also had a tendency to devour human flesh, and that is why he was dispelled from the heavens, and he was placed close to cemeteries. And that is how in South Kerala and also in South Tamil Nadu, you notice that modern temples exist very close to cremation grounds and things like that. And apart from this, as I said, these megalithic folk also believed in spirit worship and also ancestor worship. And some of the excavations from Kerala urn burials have also yielded some of the cult figurines associated with their beliefs. Some of it, resemble those mother goddess figurines, which are very popular in different parts. And the similar mother goddess figurines from megalithic context is also reported from Adichanallur. And recently, from Kasaragod district, we have come across urns with ashes inside, with such sort of human forms, like those of the Bhuta cult, as applied descendants on the exterior. Now, such forms like the ones which you call Bhuta cult or the Theyyam forms also are excavated or also seen in the Edakal rock shelter, which is today located in Wayanad. And in the Edakal rock shelter, as I stated earlier, inscriptions of Chera and later kings are found, also up to the Kadamba King Vishnuvarman's inscription is found here. And also on the walls we notice many engravings, and some of these engravings, like you notice here, have got these appendages. They've got very pure headgears and coiffure and costumes, and they look very similar to the Theyyam forms which are enacted today, and which also has its base in ancestor worship and spirit worship. And you can notice that there is a large headgear supported by a lady figure by two strings held in the hands, and similar Theyyam forms are also noticed in the Theyyam forms which are enacted in the North Kerala region. Theyyam, there are also temples for Theyyam forms, and in many cases the people who dress in these form or who take the form of these Theyyams belong to the backward community or the scheduled caste community in the modern parlance, and so clearly indicating that this was a worship which was prevalent not in the Brahmanical practices, but more along the ethnic populace of our land. And the most famous of these temples is the Muthappan temple near Talasheri, which again was a very popular sort of non-Brahmanical deity centered around ancestor worship that came into popularity in that region. But since the popularity grew up so vastly that it was finally accepted into Brahmanical fold by saying that the Muthappan Theyyam are incarnations of Shiva and Vishnu. So these two forms, the larger form represents Shiva and the smaller forms represent Vishnu. It's not that ancestor worship was in such forms existed only in the upper reaches of the society, but the tribal community in Kerala or the ethnic populace in Kerala also had, they also still practice the form of ancestors worship, where such human forms are made and they worship it as their ancestors. So they believe that the spirit of the ancestors are embodied in these figures and they worship. The one you notice on the lower side is this is recorded by Mathir in his work, and he is actually he was the chief priest of Shabarimala temple or the Ayyappa temple at Shabarimala, and who was killed, and his icon was made and worshipped. So ancestor worship continued in different forms in the ethnic populace of Kerala despite Brahmanism arriving in Kerala. now coming to the second period, Cheras or Kerala Putras as a clan or a dynasty along with Satyaputra, Cholas, Pandyas are mentioned in Ashokan edicts dating to around 3rd century BCE. And when we say that 3rd century BC, Satyaputra, Cholas, Pandyas and Cheras are mentioned in Ashokan inscriptions, they have attained the status of a chieftaincy or a kingship or a clan, which was important even for Ashoka to even acknowledge as a southern neighbor. So this particular emergence into clan or chieftaincy, which even Ashoka had to acknowledge in 3rd century BC. This must not have happened overnight. It must have taken at least a couple of centuries or even more to have attained this particular status of a clan or a dynasty. So the antiquity of or the early history of this particular region may go back to even 6th or 5th century BCE. Now, there are excavations which have taken place in Kodumanal and other places in the Kongu region, have brought out a lot of pottery inscribed in Tamil Brahmi. So clearly pushing the antiquity of writing and probably early historic habitation in this region to around 4th and 5th century BCE. And the contact with North also existed during the period is also evident from the Panchmar coins and other things which we find here. And it's popularly believed that the Chera dynasty was founded by Uday Jaran in around 130 BC. And Cheras possibly had two capitals, one centered at Karud in Kongu Nadu and other in Kodungalur or Mahadevapuram or Muziris in Kerala. The name of early Chera kings ruling the Kongu and Kerala region with titles like Irumburai clearly indicates that the Dravidian or Tamil origin of these kings. Jainism, Buddhism and Vedic rituals arose as gleaned from Sangam literature. Contemporary to the Cheras in North Kerala was a dynasty called Nannans with their capital at Erimala. After their decline, the same region also witnessed the rise of Mushika kings and also later period the Kolathiri kings. The region south of Pamba was under the Pandyas, as according to Periplus of European Sea, it is mentioned that the area south of Pamba was under the Pandya rule. And in 2nd century CE, the Pandya power from Madurai probably weakened, and this resulted in the Ayas, who were actually probably feudatories to Pandyas during that early period, and they attained some sort of independency and established the capital at Vizhinjam, which is also known as Balita, Blinka, or Banmala in various other sources. Balita is mentioned in Periplus of European Sea. Blinga is mentioned by Ptolemy. Bamla is again also mentioned in a record by the Greco-Roman records, and Vizhinjam is also has Vilinam, because Vizhinjam is a triplet sound which is typically of Kerala, but in inscriptions it is sometimes known as Vilinam. And if you examine the names of early kings like Andrian, Tithian, Athian, the names also clearly indicate their indigenous origin, and they were probably of non-Brahmanical faith, but though they claim that they are of Vrishni or Yadava Kula. The Malabar coast, known as the land of Cherabutras or Kerabutras in Greco-Roman literature, witnessed flourishing trade around 1st century and 2nd century CE, and this also led to the first wave of urbanization in Kerala. The period between 3rd century and 6th century CE is known as the Dark Ages, and Kerala seems to have been under the Kalabara or the Kadamba rulers then. It is believed that Jainism and Buddhism received upper hand as religions during this particular period. Brahmins migrated into Kerala from north in different waves. Myths attribute these migrations to states Parasurama and Agastya. Parashurama is said to have established 64 villages, 32 in Tulunad and 32 in Kerala, and the last of which was in Tiruvalla along the Pamba basin. And as I said, the south of the Pamba remained with the Pandyas for a longer duration. Now, Brahmins influenced the ruling king in the society in many ways, and the kings, possibly through Hiranyagarbha, as I said earlier, they were actually non-Brahmanical ethnic populace, and these kings who were ruling probably through Hiranyagarbha attained the status of a Kshatriya and came to adorn the title of Varman around 6th century, 7th century CE, though they still retain the matriarchal traditions. No king is known by this title Varman before the second Chera empire coming into existence at Mahodayapura. Now, if we were to trace the structural evidences of temple during early Chera period, structural temples may have existed in Kerala from very early times. There is a reference in Silappatikaram that the Chera king Sengutuvan had invited Gajabahu of Sri Lanka during the installation of the Kannaki or Patani Devi idol in a temple at Vanchi or Tiruvanchikulam. And this happens around 2nd century CE. So the structural temples may have started to come up during this particular 2nd century CE, if you go by the narrations in Shilappatikaram. And inscriptions of Chera kings found in some Jain beds also indicate that Chera kings had also contributed to the Jainist monks. And Sangam literature clearly indicates that Buddhism was also vogue in the society during the early centuries. Now, an interesting reference to a temple which is not related to the indigenous people occurs in the Putanga tables. The Putanga tables, the original, which is dated to around 2nd century AD, demarcates a temple for Augustus at Muziris. And this temple may have been made of perishable material, hence the actual evidence is not there. However, the representation of temple of Augustus occur in the Putanga tables. This is the temple concerned, dedicated to Augustus. It clearly indicates there was a Greco-Roman populace in Muziris, which reached there due to trade, and the excavations of Patanam close to Kodungalur has yielded a large evidence of Greco-Roman trade in the form of amphora and other pottery, Greco-Roman pottery, and also other evidences have come out from Patnam, clearly indicating that the flourishing trade between the Kerala coast or Muziris as well as the Persian Gulf. So this temple is interesting because this temple, as it is depicted, you notice that entrances into the shrine were provided by doors on the side, as well as there was a gabled, and there was an entrance from one of the major entrance was from the frontal side. And interestingly, this particular temple has a sloping roof. And sloping roof, some scholars would say that it's due to the influence from China or due to the influence from North India that the Kerala developed a sloping roof in its architecture. But that doesn't happen to be the case, because sloping roof is found all along the Konkan region, and it's basically because due to the high precipitation or the high rainfall in this region that sloping roofs were made. And sloping roofs in ancient times used to be basically using either grass or palm leaves that the sloping roofs used to be thatched, because timber was available in plenty. So annually, just before rains, this particular sloping roof used to be, redone as it was still in recent times. So sloping roof, being adopted even for a temple of Augustus built in Muziris, and its continuation into later times is very interesting fact. Now, during this period also, hypothetical shrines are opened. Open air shrines and carved for the folk deities, and Shasta and ancestor must have existed like it exists even now. Period theory, as I said, it actually relates with the rise of Mushikas and Kolatri in north, the later Cheras or Kulashekaras or Perumals in central Kerala, centered around Kodungalur or Makode, and the Ayas in south and Wayanad in the region of Kollam, and Pandyas further south. So between 7th and 8th century, you notice that there was constant incursions of Pandyas into southern region, and when the Pandyas weakened, the Ayas would again rise up to raise to power in this particular region. And this particular period also saw that that the West Asia, the trade with West Asia and China started to increase, and this flourishing trade between West Asia and East China paved way for the second urbanization of Kerala. There was also migrations of the Christians, Jews, and Muslims into Kerala, and these communities were actually given rights and privileges by the Cheras and Wayanad rulers, and they were given the right to settle in Kerala, and they were privileged with high, they were given privileges in par with the socially allied people, and they were given the responsibility to handle this external maritime trade. So external maritime trade, when a ship on its own anchored in any of the ports which were there in Western Coast, it used to pay, the ship used to pay 1,000 dirhams to the state in which they actually come and anchored. So 1,000 dirhams in those times, you can imagine that the amount of revenue that the state derived from the flourishing trade activities which between West Asia and China, which had places like Vizhinjam or Kollam as major port of transaction as well as exchange. Brahmins continued to migrate in different ways into Kerala, and Brahmanization led to the emergence of various temples and temple-centric village, and also the society became stratified with the administrative units of under temple, trying to bifurcate the responsibility of running the temple between various sections, and the land which was donated for the upkeep of the temples also started to be given on lease to various communities. And we also notice that the serfdom also starts to emerge, with temple lands being given for cultivation, and the revenue just generated went back to the temple and also for the various activities of the temple. And such donations which were given to temples were also protected by the king or the local governor or chieftain, and it almost reached a theocratic setup when temple lands and temple came to predominate the social scenario. And indigenous religion during this period was assimilated into the Brahmanical one, and new tantric agamic form of worship emerged in Kerala during this period. None of these local chieftains like Mushikas or Cheras or Wayanad, these local chieftains and dynasties do not seem to have had any independent style of temple architecture as such, but it seems to have been guided. The temple architecture seems to have been guided by the Vastu Shastra and Satapazis and the Yajamanas who initiated the project of temple construction. In later times, the Kerala temple architecture was largely based on the texts like Tantra Samuchaya. And in Kerala, if you examine, unlike Tamil Nadu, there are very few instances of a king directly getting involved or initiating a temple building activity in Kerala. And one of the earliest instances of which we have epigraphical records is that of I King Karunandarakkan, and he probably was the first to purchase land from the Sabha to build a temple for Vishnu at Parathavi Shekharapuram. And this temple also was provided with additional villages and land for its upkeep and maintenance. And this temple also had a shala or a boarding school for Brahmins to learn Vedic practices and also martial arts. And the Aya rulers who ruled in South probably had a tolerance towards other religion, because they also donated for the cause of Buddhism and Jainism. Vikramaditya Varguna, the High King, like his predecessor Kanunanda Tikan, also purchased and donated land for the Buddhist temple, which was located at Sri Mulavasam, and assigned its protection to one of his vassals or marshal called Veerakota. So in this inscription, it is stated that the temple for at Sri Mulavasam, the Buddhist temple at Sri Mula, was located close to the sea, and it was getting deteriorated. Hence, the land was given in donation, so for its upkeep. And it's quite possible that such lands donated also found resentment from the society by non-believers, and probably that is one reason why that Vikramaditya Varguna gives the protection of this land donated to Sri Mulavasam is assigned to Veerakota, who was either a vassal or marshal of Vikramaditya Varguna. And during this period, some of the earliest edifices or temples come up in Kerala, and we notice that both forms, as in Tamil Nadu, the rock cut caves as well as structural temple comes to be erected during this third phase in large numbers. And the rock cut caves comes in various parts of Kerala. However, there is a concentration of these rock cut caves in the south of Pamba, in the Aya territory, which is also shuffled by the Pandyas intermediately. And the cave temples also show an influence of the Pandya school of art and architecture. The Kerala Dravida style of structural temples in circular, square and oblong pans with gable roof also emerges during the 8th-9th century, and mostly along the coast and the midland regions. There is a paucity of early temples, medieval temples along the upper hill ranges, and this may be due to the popularity of folk religious among the tribals residing there, or due to sparse Brahmanical population in that region. In the Aya territories of South Kerala and Palakkad region, the typical Dravidian style temples, as we notice in Tamil Nadu, totally constructed in stone, are observable. Cholas invaded Malenadu, and their focus was on attacking the major ports, Vizhinjam, which is also known as Kandalur Shala in inscriptions, and he says that he had destroyed a fleet of ships which were anchored at the port. The Wayanad capital Kollam was attacked, and the Mahadevapuram was attacked, and they extended their attacks into further north around up to Edimala region. So during the Chola invasion had a very drastic impact on the administration and temple building activity in Kerala. And if you examine the inscriptions of the Cholas, you notice that lot of wealth which was taken from Malenad as war booty, and some of the temple constructions in the Chola period were actually funded by the booty which was reserved, taken from the Malenad port towns as war booty. And this also resulted in the fall of the Kulashekara Empire in around the first quarter of the 12th century. And during the attacks of the Cholas, they saw that many of the shalas attached to the temples were destroyed, as Rajaraja destroyed the Kandalur Shala temple and the shala which was attached to it. And he also took it to the fact that he stopped feeding Brahmins and the students attached to such shalas and temples. So after the fall of the Kulashekara Empire and the declining of the Chola hegemony or power in Kerala, there was this absence of strong leadership, and the temples which were actually managed during early Chera period by by a sort of a democratic setup, finally lands up into in the hands of many of the Brahmin families, and the temple land turns into Devasam. And because of the clout, of such temple lands landing in the hands of Brahmin families, and there were some coming to exert their clout in certain regions. They also exerted their power in the area close to the temples, which is known as Sanketams, and these lands also came to be exempted from tax during the period of Vietnam rulers. Building, worshipping, and maintenance of medieval temple Kerala was vested with the Kshetra Sanketam, which was governed by a committee of Nambudiri, Uralar, and villages, and a Sanketa Adhikari. Such Sanketam, which land holdings were independent entities and were protected from political tussles. King and wealthy people made donations for the upkeep of these temples. Kings have tried to gain rights into such certain Sanketams, which were very wealthy and which were very strong. They are supposed to even taken refuge in some of these Sanketams during conflicts. And local kings actually didn't defy this particular tradition of Sanketam being protected and beyond the scope of attack or loot. But Hyder Ali and Tipu defied this tradition in a large way, and massive scale, many of the temples in North Kerala or Sanketams were attacked and looted. And in South, some Sanketams grew so powerful that it was even challenged they even challenged the king who was ruling in that particular area of South Kerala. And Marthavandavarma actually was, threatened by these sort of temple authorities time and again, and he actually used force to suppress these temple committees and reinstated an authority of the king in such particular medieval Kshetra Sanketams. He added on a nominee from the king's side so as to get control over such Sanketam and to stop it being from powerful and take a attack on even the kings. However, after the arrival of the British, Diwan resident Colonel Munro actually took over the temple properties in Travancore and merged it with the government in 1811. Some major temples in North Kerala or Malabar, which had survived through Tipu's invasion, were also taken over by the Madras Regulation 7 of 1817 and placed under the Board of Revenue. So in 1923, a separate department or the Devasan department was formed in the Travancore kingdom to manage the affairs of the temples which are scattered in various parts. Some of the temples, family temples, which were directly under the control of royal families, consequent to independence, were brought under independent temple trust. The final blow for temple lands came with the land sealing regulation, which was enacted in 1976. And with this, many landed properties which were given for cultivation to tenants were lost to the tenants, and the Namburi families which had landed property also lost much of their property to the tenants as part of this Land Sealing Regulation Act, which came up in 1976, causing to the decline of the Namburi families as well as some of the many prominent temples which had land holdings. Now I get to the second part of my lecture, which I try to concentrate on the structural aspects and the embellishment schemes which are noticed in the temples proper. So architecturally, that as I said earlier, structural temples and stone temples comes to be erected during the Chera period in 8th-9th CE, contemporaries with almost the Pallavas and the Pandyas in Tamil Nadu. Ed Sarkar, in his monumental work Temples of Kerala, has divided Kerala temples into three periods. The early phase dating between 8 and 1000 CE, the middle phase between 1001 and 1300 CE, and the late phase between 1301 and 1800 CE. Some of the early temples, as I stated earlier, are of the rock cut type, and they are found in two groups. One in the ancient South Travancore, now part, which is also a part of Kanyakumari district, which I had stated that the southern Travancore region was also always shuffled between the Ayas and the Pandyas, and this particular group is extensively found in the South Travancore region. There are also a few rock cut temples in central Travancore region, and the rock cut cells include simple rock cut chambers with idol inside, or they are actually they have a pillared portico or a mandapa in front with a square sanctum sanctorum cut into the back wall or into the side walls, trying to keep the orientation in an east-west direction. The rock cut temples in South Kerala are observed at Kaviyur, Kottukal, Ayurpara, Vizhinjam, which are all in Trivandrum and Kollam districts. And in Kanyakumari district, which was anciently part of South Travancore, rock cut temples are noticed at Tirunandikara, Ariya Pandipuram, Bhutapandi, etc. And all these caves and early temples are built in an area which show tremendous influence of the Pandya school of art. These are some of the rock cut temples which are noticed in this thing. The one you noticed on the top here on the left is the Tirunandikara temple, which has got a pillared porch in front, and the Garbhagriha is cut into the side wall so as to face east. Then there is the temple at Ariya Pandipuram. This is probably the only temple dedicated to Vishnu. The rest, majority of them, are all dedicated to Shiva. There is one rock cut stone also in Vizhinjam. Then there is one in Madavurpara, which is again in Trivandrum, and Kottukal, which is bordering the Kollam and Trivandrum district. One of the most intact specimens is at Kaviyur, and in Kaviyur what we notice is that there is a pillared veranda, and there are, in the veranda back wall we notice Ganesha, a doorkeeper, and also we notice a donor and a saint represented. The top ones are the sculptures which are noticed in a doorkeeper or a Dwarapala, probably a guardian or a donor, and then you have also an ascetic carved. Apart from that, I said you have a Ganesha, and in the back wall of this particular, you have a small Garbhagriha cut enshrining a Shivalinga. These images or the sculptures in Kaviyur have a great similarity with the sculpture which are noticed in rock cut caves at Veerashikhamani and Kurandara Kovil. You notice that the style of these are quite similar to the ones which you notice in the Pandya cave temples at Veerashikhamani and Kurandara Kovil. Clearly indicate that this tradition was borrowed from the Pandya school in the east. During this period, also structural temples start to emerge. This is a temple at Parthaveshekarapuram, which was constructed by I King, and which I had already mentioned, which is built in the typical Dravidian style, Vimana in the typical Dravidian style. These temples actually existed at Vizhinjam. One of it is completely destroyed, one still stands. And they also continue the typical Dravidian sign. Apart from that, in Palakkad, Malappuram region also, we notice the typical Dravidia totally stone-built temples, clearly indicating that there was an influence of the Tamil tradition in this particular region. So apart from the typical Kerala Dravida style, we also have temples which are actually built in the typical Dravidian style in South Kerala, as well as in areas which actually connected with Tamil Nadu, especially the Palakkad gap and things like that. And now we're coming to the Kerala Dravida temples. The Kerala temples externally could be of square, circular, elliptical, or rectangular, or even upside down in shape. Rectangular shrines are basically dedicated to, they are rather few, they are dedicated to either Saptamatrikas or reclining Vishnu. Elliptical temples are less during the early period, but they catch up during the later period, and largely elliptical temples are erected for Shasta. Circular and square temples are actually the I'm sorry, the apsidal temples are actually the ones which are erected for Shasta during later period. Elliptical temples are there, but very few elliptical temples. Circular and square are the common pattern which you get in plan. The main sanctum sanctorum installing the idol always is a typical Dravidian Vimana. That is the sanctum sanctorum, which houses externally it could be square or circular, elliptical or rectangular or upside down plan. But in many cases, the sanctum sanctorum which enshrines the image or the idol is always built in the typical Dravidian Vimana style. And since these two elements, the external circular square, the square, circular or elliptical or rectangular forms, having the sloping roofs, the sanctum sanctorum always in the center had this typical Dravidian Vimana. Since it's a merger of these two sides, that is how this the Kerala Dravidian nomenclature for this particular temple comes up. In a typical Kerala temple, the layout is, you have an outer prakara wall, which is known as Paramadil in the local parlance, and in cardinal directions you have gopurams or entrances into the through these particular outer walls, which is either known as gopuram or nada. They are generally found in cardinal directions or in at least two major directions. And this particular gopuram or nada gives entrance into the Puruthe Balivattam, or the exterior circumambulatory passage of the temple, which is enclosed within this outer wall. And there is also an Agathe Balivattam, which enshrines the sanctum sanctorum proper. This Agathe Balivattam is surrounded or is enclosed within a Chittambalam or Nalambalam, and in its center we have the Sri Kovil, or the sanctum sanctorum. The projecting plinth of the Nalambalam in its exterior wall, the Nalambalam's exterior wall, you have the Valakkumadam, which is affixed on it, and the plinth of this Nalambalam's exterior, helps in people to climb over it and light the lamps which are set on the Valakkumadam. And in elevation, the temple comprises of an adhisthana, which is generally built of granite, and the bhitti or the walls are done in lateritic stone and rarely of granite or wood. All the temples have sloping or gabled roofs with one or more tiers. The early roofs were thatched of palm leaf or grass, and some of them were actually received copper or terracotta tilings. And from 19th century onwards, the Mangalore tiles become popular roofing material, and the roof is topped by a Thayakudam or Kalash. Due to the non-easy availability of granites, easy or due to the lack of availability of granite stone, the sculpture works are limited to only the main icons in the sanctum sanctorum, Dwarapalas, Adhisthana, Pranala, Sopana, or sometimes the Buddha figures under the Pranala. So other decorations were done in wood, stucco, and mural paintings. This is the layout of the temples. The outer prakara wall with cardinal with gopuras or nadas in cardinal directions. Many of these gopurams were built in the typical Kerala sloping style. And once we enter the Agathe Balivattam, then we have the Nalambalam, which encloses the sanctum sanctorum proper, which also has a detached mandapa in front. And this Nalambaram towards the main cardinal direction also has an extension which covers the Balikal. So within the in inner circumambulatory passage, you also have stones representing Ashtadikpalakas and Saptamatrikas and other minor deities. So this is how it would look. You have the Nalambalam, or the enclosed space, enclosure, around the Sanctum Sanctorum. This is the Sanctum Sanctorum with gabled roof. You have a Namaskara Mantapa, detached Namaskara Mantapa, a temple or a well or a water source in the northeast, and also a Tevalapura, which is actually the area where the cooking of various temple related produces are done. Ground plans of the temples, as I said, square and are very popular. The square temples, sometimes they have an attached mandapa in front, and there is an inner circumambulatory around the Sanctum Sanctorum. And the exterior walls, as I said, is built of laterite. Sometimes it is also tiled with sloping roofs are tiled, and the exterior decorations of the Pitti are done either using stucco or done in with paintings. Circular and apsidal temples, as I said, some of the earlier scholars have said that it could, these particular circular style could have come from north or from the temples which are constructed in Sri Lanka. But these temples are, some of the early temples in circular pan is actually earlier than that, the ones which you notice in Sri Lanka. So it doesn't seem to have been borrowed from Sri Lanka. And maybe it is already known that, some of the megalithic monuments were, constructed in circular fashion with the Sanctum Sanctorum or the main chamber placed in the center. So it's quite possible that the circular plan also was derived from, indigenously derived by people. And this it could be single tala sloping roof or with tala with pillars given inside, for supporting the roof. The pillars, according to the height of the pillars, the number of pillars varied, but the Sanctum Sanctorum was square, typical Dravidian Vimana, which enshrined the image. Apsidal temples also, one of the largest is in Madur. As I said, some of these early temples were dedicated to the trinities, but later these apsidal temples of smaller nature generally housed Shasta images. Sometimes you notice all the three styles, either square, apsidal, and also circular temples in the same within the same Nalambalam, as in Trivegalapura near Patambi. You notice that all the three styles are prevalent within same Nalambalam. As I said earlier, because of the paucity of good variety of granite's use was limited to either the Adhisthana, the Pranala, or sometimes the Buddha figures stood under the Pranala, or Dwarapala images which flank the doorways. And sculptural decorations are also sometimes also seen on the flanks of the Sopana. So Sopana also sometimes these figures are related to the rabbinical faith, either dancing Shiva or sometimes images of Vishnu. But in many instances, you notice Shankanida and Padminiti carved on either flanks, and also you notice this Gajavala motif, which is seen on the Sopana flanks, which is typically of a very late period, probably posterior to the Vijayanagar period. Sculptural decorations are also noticed in the Barricade, which adorn the temples. Apart from that, apart from these decorations which is stone, you see in stone, most of the temples, either in the Namaskara Mandapa or in the Mandapas concerned, they are highly decorated with wood sculptures, either as brackets or representing the churning of the Milky Ocean, or and also sometimes representation from Ramayana and Mahabharata also are seen on the ceilings of temples. Apart from that, you also notice sometimes Ashtadikpalakas, and also sometimes you notice the Navagraha panels represented in the ceilings, which are extensively carved in wood. And rarely there are also temples which the bhitti portion it doesn't use laterite as such, but the whole bhitti is constructed using timber. And this is one such example from the Vadapalli temple in Kotim district, where you notice the whole wall is actually built and carved with wood. Now, the other motive which actually, used in decoration of these walls, because as I said, laterite is not a very good medium to sculpt sculptures. The sculptural works and decoration on the temple was compensated by the stucco or timber or wood, or by murals. And mural tradition in Kerala has its own individuality. As we all know that there is references to painted abodes and palaces in Sangam literature. And some of the earliest evidence of mural paintings in Tamilakam comes from Pallava and Pandya periods. And here in Kerala also, contemporary to Pallavas and Pandyas, we have some paintings in rock cut temples. The early paintings, as I said earlier, in contents, the artists basically concentrated on divinities. Ramayana and Mahabharata panels are not found in depictions of early paintings in Kerala. Probably Ramayana and Mahabharata had probably not attained popularity among the early painters in Kerala, because Mahabharata, it is stated, was translated into Tamil in around 7th century or so. And the Malayalam version of these epics come even further late. And if you observe the stylistic pattern exhibited in the paintings, they are similar to the Pandya and Chola traditions. And the Kerala style, or the typical Kerala idiom, which is noticed in murals, come into being only around the 16th or 17th century with the rise of the Bhakti movement and translations of epics into Malayalam. Many of these murals only date from 16th, 17th century. They start to come from only 16th, 17th century, and these paintings subsequently incorporates stories from the Ramayana and Mahabharata along with those of divinities. Now, temple murals were done using the fresco secco technique, where the paintings were done, the outlines were drawn on a plastered lateritic wall surface, and then using natural colors like red ochre, yellow ochre, lime, carbon, etc. These colors were actually mixed with glues, and using brush, they were actually painted into the surface of the outline which was drawn. So lime surface and red ochre seems to be the most popular color that have been used in the Kerala murals. Now, as I said earlier, the earliest mural painting evidences come from Tirunandikara cave, which is currently located in Kanyakumari district, and you have an image, outlined image of Ganesha, and there is also probably Narasimha and one or two figures who could be devotees or some royal people represented in this painting. On the ceiling, you have lotus scheme painted around the top. Now, Sittanavasal in Tamil Nadu also has paintings dating to around the same Pandya period. And in the lower portions, you can notice that the black and white image is an image that was found in Tirunandikara cave. And you can see the next image in the center is the one which is noticed in Sittanavasal cave. You can notice the similarity in the face, the posture, the delineation of the face, the ornamentations, the way the head is turned towards the right of the figure. Such similarities actually is noticed between the paintings at Sittanavasal and which is noticed in Tirunandikara cave, clearly indicating that it was an extension of the Pandya school flourishing in the east. And similarly, if you notice, some of the earliest paintings come to from the temples are seen in the Kumbhala Mahavishnu temple, and this particular temple, this particular painting is found in Kumbhala temple, and you notice that similar temples paintings are also found from Pallava period, even in Tamil Nadu, and they seem to hold some sort of similarity in the stylistic demio, the outlines, the way the treatment of the ornamentations. The Pandya school, the Chola school and Pandya school seems to have influenced the early murals in the Kerala temples. These are some of the murals which are found in various places. The center one is of the typical Chola school, and the one on the extreme left is of the Pallava school, and the one you see on the extreme right is the one which is noticed in the Kumbhala temple. You can draw a similarity. You can compare these body delineation, the face, the eyes, and other delineations which you observe in these female figures. They seem to show the typical classical style of the paintings, which is followed from Ajanta into Pallava and into Chola and Pandya. With this, in the Mamur school also, in the Mamur temple also, we notice that there are paintings which are of the typical early school of paintings. And as I said earlier, the typical, Kerala idiom, which is noticed in the temples, only emerged from around 16th century, and the temples, the forms which are painted here, they incorporate the typical folks tradition, and also some of the traditions or influences of the coiffure costumes, which were actually vogue in the Kodiyatam and Nangyar Kooth, which were actually dance dramas which were enacted in temples during this period. So the dance drama, coiffure and costumes have influenced the typical Kerala idiom of paintings. There are divinities which are carved. Nataraja is a very common motif, where there is coronation of Rama, there is Krishna Leela, and many other divinities which are represented. And both these traditions seems, the Nangyar Kooth, you notice that the tradition of Nangyar Kooth dressing, which you notice, is also seen in many of the female forms which are painted in the during the 16th and 17th century. So this particular style continues into later period. But one of the most interesting divinities are a typical indigenous deity that is very interestingly painted is that of Shasta. Now, Shasta is basically typical indigenous indigenous deity that comes up in Kerala or in Tamilakam, and Shasta is never mentioned as a deity in Sanskrit literature. There is only a sparse reference to him in one of the Devara hymns, which is dated to 6th, 7th century. And Shasta seems to have been a very typical indigenous deity to Kerala, and his images in stone starts to appear from around 8th, 9th century in Kerala, and it continues into later times. These Shasta images, in the Shasta images in stone, which are dated to 8th, 9th century, he is always shown seated in a Lalitasana with only two hands, Jata Mukuta. He wears kundalas in his ears. One is the Patra Kundala, and other is the Ratna Kundala, which he wears. Apart from that, he also is shown wearing Yajñopeta and also a waistband, Keyuras and Kanganas, and seated in the Lalitasana pose with one leg on a placed raised up, and on which he rests his right hand, and the left hand is placed at the thigh of the folded left hand. So this is the typical characteristic of early Shasta images which are found in stone. However, in some point of time, this particular deity was equivalent to the INR, which was found in Tamil Nadu. He was represented as a protective deity of temple lands and things like that, and he was placed in the temple compound, open to sky, and as a protecting deity, he was also offered fowl and other small animals were sacrificed to him. So that is why he was kept out of the sanctorum in the open, and this tradition continued until almost around 20th century, as we find in various records. Somehow during the later period, when the text like Sri Bhagavatam, Amshubhada, Vedagama, and Suprabheda comes up, this Shasta, in order to assimilate into the Hindu fold, because he was such a popular deity, he was treated as Harihara. Harihara is actually the son born out of the union of Shiva and Vishnu in his form as Mohini, and this child was, it is said that would not be taken to heaven, so it was abandoned in the earth. But nowhere in early literature this child was given a name. However, subsequent texts like Bhagavata and Amshubheda, Suprabhada, Vedagama, in order to assimilate Shasta, as lends him this identity of Harihara Putra as the son of Shiva and Vishnu. And it is interesting to note that during later times, we notice a development in the iconography of this particular image. And in earlier images, he was not assigned with wives or a vahana. He was just shown sitting on a stone basement. But subsequently, he comes to be associated with elephant as his vahana, and also he also comes to be assigned with his two wives, Purna and Pushkala, were actually also brought about in the worship of Shasta. So Purna and Pushkala, when he is shown together in bronze, also in stone, also we notice that's a representation, which are all datable to around 16th and 17th century only. And we have also some representation where he is shown riding an elephant, datable to around 12th, 13th century. Subsequently, in some temples in Kerala, open air shrines, if you go by local parlance, they would call it a Shasta temple, but you don't notice the image of Shasta there. Either it is open to sky, and only the images of elephants are placed representing Shasta. In earlier times, some scholars had actually tried to identify Shasta with Buddha and Ayyappa, but Shasta and Buddha icons are found in Kerala dating to the same period, and iconographically Buddha is always shown seated in a Padmasana with his Sangati covering his left shoulder and with curly hairs. So iconographically, Shasta and Buddha are two different divinities, and they cannot be considered similarity just on the basis, Shasta being assigned a name also as Shasta, Buddha being also assigned the name Shasta in Amar Kosha. So if you examine the iconography, Shasta and Buddha are two different divinities. It is Shasta who has concerts, not Ayyappa. And Shasta is the one who has a vehicle of an elephant, as we notice in the sculptural traditions. And similarly, when we notice paintings from mural paintings also, which are somehow datable to 18th and 19th century, we notice that Shasta is always depicted riding an elephant. And sometimes he is shown four-handed, as though in the form of he has attained a divine status from the typical guardian deity which he was, and he's shown riding an elephant. And he has bow and arrow, and also other kusha and Kusha, etc., held in his hand. But he's always shown, Shasta is shown riding an elephant. Now, another deity which comes up during this period is Ayyappa. Now, Ayyappa is a deity which never finds references in any Sanskrit text, Puranic, or other religious literature. So who is this Ayyappa? He's definitely a indigenous deity who was worshipped by the ethnic folk here. In Coorg, Ayyappa is also called as Maladeva or Betta Deva, or Beta means hunting. So he was considered as a hunting deity or a lord of hunt, and he was worshipped in the form of simple stones, which which were actually probably menhirs of ancient period, or sometimes a celt-like looking implement used to be worshipped, and they were And this was actually considered as Ayyappa. In Anantapura Varnanam and Kokila Sandesham literary works, which is datable to 14th and 15th century, you notice that here also Ayyappa is referred to as an hunting deity. And British writers like Kittle, Mathir, Warden Corners, they too mention Ayyappa as a hunting deity. Now, who was actually Ayyappa? Now, there is a tradition in Kerala which says that Manikandan Swami is who becomes Ayyappa during later period. This Manikandan Swami, it is said that he was a boy who was found by one of the Pandavam kings while he went on a hunting expedition. Seeing the valor of the boy, this particular boy was adopted by him and he was brought to his palace because he himself did not have children. And this Manikandan Swami, who probably had, who belonged to the Malayan community, was brought up in his household, and he actually grew up in after military training. He started to lead the army of the Pandavam family, and the king was trying to place him as the successor to the throne. But there was resentment in the king's family, and probably due to his aboriginal roots, and there was also a plot to to kill this particular Manikandan Swami. And in the plot, it was Manikandan Swami was asked to fetch tiger's milk for the queen by the chief physician for an ailment, and he ventures into the forest and attains it. But seeing the animosity in the forest in the royal family, Manikandan Swami abandons the palace and joins his kith and kin, the Malayan family, in the forest. And the community, the Malayan community, in honor of the position held by Manikandan Swami in the palace, possibly started to call him respectively as Ayyappa. And after the death, the Malayan community seems to have constructed a small temple in his honor and installed an idol in it. And this was later enlarged, and another one was built at the same place by the Pandavan Kings, and a new idol was installed in 1910. Pandavan Shasta Temple in Kotim has both Shasta and Ayyappa painted on its wall. Shasta is shown as riding on an elephant, but in the Ayyappa, he is shown as a hunting deity riding a galloping horse, and he is shown two-handed, dark complexion, as his Malayan, probably to indicate his Malayan origin, and always he holds in his right hand an arrow, and he's attended by other tribal community people hunting along with him, and one of the persons and attendant holding an umbrella over his head or close to him. This whole umbrella is never held before any deity as such in Hinduistic fold, and it's possibly to show that Ayyappa had attained the status, a higher social status because of his association with Mandalam kings. This royal umbrella, or the umbrella showing the royal status, is held along with Ayyappa. So along this upper reaches, is shown hunting scenes along with his kith and kin, and in the middle portion you have a series of animals protected in an enclosure, and in the lower portion you have a person killing a tiger or a leopard with his bare hands and sword. Similar representation is noticed in many temples where Ayyappa is shown riding a horse with the same iconographical characters which I mentioned, and surrounding him you notice that his kith and kin hunters carrying killed boar or in the act of hunting. So this tradition is also known in sculptural representations of wood, where the panel is divided into three: the top representing the hunting panel, in the center the Ayyappa riding a horse, and then a person showing his valor by killing a tiger with his bare hands and sword in hand. So Ayyappa iconography is different from that of Shasta, what is noticed earlier and which continues into later period. Shasta is always shown riding an elephant, and Ayyappa is shown as a hunting deity, riding on an elephant, accompanied by his kith and kin, hunting different animals in the forested environment. And in the panel is also shown a person killing a tiger with bare hands and a sword in his hand. Shabarimala Ayyar temple is associated with Manikanda Sami, and which is a memorial temple built by the Malayan company and other ethnic groups which worshipped it. The Pandavan family only undertook renovations of this temple, and the first idol in this renovated temple was installed in 1910. And in 1950, there was vandalism and fire which engulfed the temple, and an image similar to one which was installed in 1910 was recast and enshrined in this particular temple. This enshrined images of Pachaloha built where he is shown seated on a lotus pedestal, both the arms, both the legs raised and placed on it, and tied by the yoga patta with only two hands, one extended, and placed the left hand extending over the left knee, and the right placed in Khyana Mudra or Chinna Mudra. Now, this particular deity at Shabarimala is today known as Dharma Shasta. So the new idol which came into existence after the one replacing the image idol of Manikanda Swami attained the character and principles of, it assimilated both the character of Shasta and as well as Ayyappa, and brought in Brahmanical form of practices in its worship. The earlier Ayyappa temple, assigned to Manikanda Swami, there was sacrificial forms of worship. During every festival, only 5 days it was open during Makar Sankranti period, and even goats used to be sacrificed there for safe travel of the pilgrims to Shabarimala temple. That was changed, and Brahmanical practices came into vogue with the installation of the Dharma Shasta idol, which is in worship now. And during the course of the 19th and 20th century, we noticed that in the iconographical character of in some of the sculptures which are represented, Shasta, which earlier had elephant, Ayyappa, which had horse as a vehicle, but you notice that the Dharma Shasta images has got now tiger as a vehicle. So iconographically, Shasta, Ayyappa, and Dharma Shasta are three different divinities which has evolved as part of Brahmanization of popular ethnic deities in the society into the Agnik fold. So now Dharma Shasta which has got a very popular worship in different parts of India, is actually the image which was installed in 1950s is found replicated in many temples dedicated to Ayyappa or Dharma Shasta in various places, and his vehicle is a tiger, and that is also come to be represented in mural paintings and also in photographs and other things. And these are the references which I have used in the preparation of this particular presentation. Thank you on all. Stay safe, stay happy.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. It was a very, very interesting coverage from the BCE period to all the way up to the 20th century, effectively. If you take Ayyappa as a deity, there are a few questions that I have. I don't know the time availability, but we will at least, let me ask some of the questions that the viewers have asked, and I have some questions.
Okay, definitely.
Can you stop the share if that is okay? So it will be easier.
Yeah.
Thank you. So one of the points that I could notice was that if I start from the rock cut temples, I'm leaving out the earlier prehistoric kind of portions, which are very interesting, but they don't really come under the period that we are also talking about, the 8th to 13, the rock cut architecture seems very close to the Pandyan rock cut temples. Very close in terms of its ideation, the way it is structured, etc. And then when the structural temple starts, also there is a, you showed, I think the Parthiva Shekarapuram. It's, if I only showed the picture to somebody, they can't even figure out that it is actually from Kerala.
Yes.
But then there is a variation. I mean, the base is very common.
There are actually temples in and around Parthiva Shekarapuram which are built in the typical Kerala and the Dravidian style during the Aya period itself.
Right. So the driver that if at all I can see is that they are set on completely different kind of Agama and Shilpa Sastra texts, the Vastu Sastra texts. And I take it that way that the deviation comes because there is a textual deviation. The perhaps the priests are different. The the sculptors are different. Their schools are different, and they have decided that they're going to change things because the material, the environment. Now, until then, there is a sort of high degree of commonality that Kerala is not. It is a distinct geography, but it is basically part of the larger Tamil Dravida country. Yes. But then there is a deviation. The language is probably going to split a little down the line. But
it splits later.
The temple practice starts moving away even before the language starts moving away. Can I say that?
Yeah, temple architecture, attains a sort of special character by around 8th, 9th century itself. From 9th century onwards, you notice that popularity of style of gable roof and things like those things emerge. Maybe they must have tried, some of these typical Dravidian Vimana types because of the heavy rains that lash this particular area. They must not have found it, waterproof during heavy rains, and they also easily susceptible to vegetative growth and things like that. So once the vegetation actually comes up over these temples, the roots penetrate into the thing, leads to seeping into the temples. So obviously then they cannot, Kerala has a monsoon which runs into 7 or 8 months, so automatically the worship within the temple also gets affected during this process and things like that. So that is probably one of the reasons which they decided to enclose it by an outer wall and then provide gable roof so that the water immediately falls away, and the ablution and other ritualistic things can be conducted within the sanctum sanctorum.
Right. And one of the distinct feature, though it is also there in some of the Tamil Nadu temples, is the way the pranala is structured with with a bhuta holding it. Or there seems to be a lot of effort that is going into it. Is there anything specific that there is a reason for that particularly?
These bhutas are actually basically bhutas as carriers, or dwarf dwarapalas as carriers of weight is found in even in Buddhist tradition and many other places. So they have adopted that particular feature of bhutas, or small dwarf fixtures coming to carry the weight of the pranala over the head. Is actually it's more symbolic, and because the pranala it's quite a heavy piece of work which runs into the interior of the temple. So eventually, at some point, if the temple is disturbed, this pranala should not fall out. So that is probably it acts as a support to this pranala, and the Buddha figures, both male and female, are sometimes noticed in this thing. It is not that only male Buddhas are shown supporting this. Both female Buddhas are also shown supporting this. This is probably the only independent in-ground sculptures, apart from the ones which you notice in the Sanctum Sanctorum, are these Buddha figures which you find in stone.
Right. So there are few questions from Soundari Rajkumar. First is the Namaskar Mandapam always square?
So Namaskara Mandapam is always square and detached from the main temple.
Okay. Again, then another question from her is, why in some Kerala temples the entrance has a small barricade, or is it applicable only to Bhagavati temples?
No, in Kerala temples, unlike the temples in North India and South Indian temples, even in Tamil Nadu or Karnataka, no one is allowed to enter the sanctum sanctorum or the the Garbhagriha. You can enter only up to the Sopana. Within beyond the Sopana, nobody is allowed to enter. Only the main person who worship, or the Brahmin who worships that conducts the worship, is allowed to enter. So this barricade, is just to prevent people or devotees from entering into the sanctum sanctorum. It is not that it is prevalent only in Bhagavati temples. There are many other temples nobody is allowed to enter or venture beyond this particular sanctum or sopana of the temple.
Okay. Kishore has a question. Do the Kerala structural temples have specific features on the Vimana of Sri Kovil? From the pictures you showed, it seems that there is just only a slanting roof kind of a structure.
Yeah, the slanting roof is the only thing which you find on the Vimana, and it is topped by a kalasha.
Okay, that as like any other South Indian temple, there is that
kalasha on the top. That is actually made of metal made kalasha on this.
Okay. Another question from Saundari is, what is the period of Tantra Samuchaya?
Tantra Samuchaya is very late. I think it's around 17th or 18th century.
I see. Okay. Is there any text then prior to that which
I think Tantra Samuchaya, maybe, I'm not pretty sure. I think 16th or 17th, that's all.
So between the 8th, 9th to Tantra Samuchaya, there is no other text that is available, extant, quoted elsewhere but not available.
I don't think there are any special text in Kerala as such, because Shilparatna and basically devotes in the sculptures and things like that. I think Vastu Shastra governs many of the temple layout, and other features are governed by Vastu Shastra, because different, within the layout, situating different components is definitely governed by Vastu elements.
Okay. Now, see, typically, if you look at again the Tamil Nadu model of development, so somewhere along the way you have festivals getting added. Particularly, I think there must have been during the Cholas and Pandya period. Then there is a little breakage. Then the Vijayanagaras and the Nayakas come and then introduce a whole range of festivals, temple festivals. Now, how did the Vijayanagara Nayak rule never extended into Kerala?
Yes.
When you were talking about the Kerala style of festivals, temple festivals, what is the origin for them, or how did they develop and expand?
Now, if you go by inscriptions, there are inscriptions which says that the annual temple festival will be conducted for so many days. And during this particular period, a temple priest would be paid in addition to his usual duties. Such things are mentioned, but they do not go into how these temple festivals were celebrated. There is no clear-cut mention of elephants coming into being.
Right, like the Tiruchur Puram kind of.
Yeah. These are the elephants coming. Elephants. There are mentions in inscriptions of elephants being used to measure land, which were actually donated to temples and things like that. Okay. I don't remember seeing any inscription which says that the temple festivity involved parading of elephant. I have not come across, and neither is it noticed in any of the mural paintings. We do not see, like you see in modern period, we do not notice any mural painting showing a deity being, kept on a caparisoned elephant and actually paraded. But this tradition of parading elephants with the holy tooth existed in Sri Lanka. That was an annual. So it is quite possible that this tradition came into being from, the Sri Lankan this thing, where temple elephants were actually paraded with the holy tooth in Kelaniya. So it's quite possible that this was borrowed from there. Probably initially when these kings started doing it, they must have held only one elephant. But since to increase the pomp and show of this thing, these keeps, only first the presiding deity was kept and the subsidiary deities were not kept. Then subsidiary deities also came to be paraded on elephants. And that is how, this pomp and show kept on increasing. In inscriptions and in paintings, you only see Panchavadyam played, 5 instruments played. In the 5 instruments played, you do not notice any sort of animals being paraded or that deity being taken out and paraded on it. In Mookambika and all, the main deity is taken out and she's carried in a palanquin around the temple.
Okay.
So here we notice that the main deity is brought out of the temple during Sri Bali. The transportable idol is brought. It is carried in procession by the auspicious instrument playing, and that image is carried by the Brahmin priest, and a person holds an umbrella behind the Brahmin priest. So the idol is carried in the hand.
Okay.
In rituals which were there. It is only during annual processions or in some very big temples like Guruvayur, etc., that even during the intermediary, functions, that animals or elephant is used to parade the deity. Otherwise, in major temples, it is the main deity is brought out as Ulsava Murti or whatever, he is brought out and it is held in the hands of the Brahmana. Okay. Who conducts the worship, and then taken back into the sanctum. While it is taken out of the sanctum sanctorum is locked, and after the Sri Valipura, it is sanctified and kept back in the sanctum sanctorum.
Okay. Interesting. Thank you. Thanks a lot. There's one question that I missed. Maybe I can ask now. This question from Mr. Nageshwara Rao. He wants to know whether the Kalabras and Kadambas have some kind of a relationship.
Kalabras inscriptions are found in, I think, Andhra Pradesh. Kalabra inscriptions are found, but they do not speak about, I don't think they speak about Kadambas as such. But here in Kadamba, in Takl shelter, we have got inscriptions of Kadamba Kings, and we also have a copper plate from Nilambur area which mentions of Kadamba Kings. So Kadambas had their sway in North Kerala, and in Kumbhala region, there was a feudatory of the Kadamba Kings. There is a family in Kumbhala, which is known as also the Kumbhala Kings. It was an independent, a small chieftain there, and he claims ancestry from Kadamba family even now.
I see. Okay.
So Kadamba had their sway in North Kerala is obvious because the Kumbhala family still trace their ancestry to the Kadamba family.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Ajit Kumar. Let me now go over to Kishore for thanking you, and then moving on to the next.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Ajit Kumar. Very enlightening lecture and a lot of takeaways from it. And a lovely interaction too after the lecture. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Next, from Kerala, we go up to the western part of India. We have Dr. Sushmita Sen, who is going to give us a talk on the Solankis and their Maru Gurjara style temples and stepwells. Dr. Sushmita Sen is a professor and head of the Department of Archaeology and Ancient History at the Maharaja Sayajirao University of Baroda. She has presented many papers in national and international conferences and published them in various journals. She has published a book titled Ridge of Splendor, Trade and Commerce of Gujarat in 2013. She was awarded a grant from the UGC major research project entitled Terracotta of Gujarat, which she successfully completed in 2018. She's completing the research process for her second book. Dr. Sen's specialization is early historical archaeology and heritage, epigraphy, numismatics and sculpture and iconography. She has 7 PhD research students working presently under her guidance from various fields of archaeology. She has been conducting classes for both undergraduate and postgraduate courses for over 2 decades. From a Tamil Heritage Trust, a lot of you would remember the Gujarat Site Seminar and the Sun Temple at Mehsana and the stepwells. Again, artworks of the Solankis. Welcome, Dr. Sushmita Sen. We look forward to hearing your lecture.
Yeah. Can you share the presentation, please?
Yeah, I'll just share.
You are on mute. Do you need any help, guidance to? Can you unmute, please, first? You are still on mute.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's get it. Just give me 2 minutes.
No problem. If you want, I can guide you too.
Actually, it is my son's laptop, which is helping me out.
Sure. No problem. Take your time.
Zoom. Wait, can photo share? Photo share for me? No, you just wait. Can you see it?
Yes, we can see it. We can see it.
1 sec. I'll put it. Now you are able to see it?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it's on.
Just no, wait. I'll go to my front page, first page.
Yes.
Okay. Am I on air now? Okay. Good evening.
Yes. Yeah, you can proceed. You can proceed.
So, good evening, everybody. Today, I'm presenting Solankis of Gujarat, the Maru Gujarat style of temples, torrents, and stepwells. So, on the onset, I would like to thank the organizers of Tamil Heritage Trust and especially to Dr. Shiva Babu and Dr. Shyam and Dr. Badri Sheshadri for helping me out and inviting me. I would also like to thank my research students for helping me out with this PPT. Solankis. Okay. Let me give you a little bit of background to the Gujarat. Gujarat is situated on the western seaboard of India. And from ancient time, we see many cultures which are settled there. We have the protohistoric settlement, prehistoric settlement, the protohistoric settlement. Then the early historic, we have the Mauryas, the Kshatraps, the Guptas, the Maitraks, and then it was broken into many small principalities. If we talk about the architecture, and then the rise of the Solankis happened. And if we talk about the architecture, after the Guptas, there was a steady degradation in the architecture of India. And when these Rajput dynasties came into being, there started an era of extravagant, astounding architecture with consequential, heavy superfluity of exasperating beauty that relished some reputations and with over elaborations of different sculpting. It was a period of final fruition and culmination of the architectural effort, and experimental and various features of previous epoch was also put into their carving. It was during the Solanki period which witnessed maturity, and they created one of the finest style of monuments in India. In Gujarat especially, and of course all over central India, there were many other Rajput kingdoms who had their own style of temple buildings. So how did these Chalukyans came into power? So before we have to see a little bit beforehand what had happened, what was happening in that territory. So North Gujarat was divided into small principalities. We have the Chapotakas, the Sandhavas, the Vaghelas. And in the central India, if you see, we had the tripartite war between the Pratihars of Kannauj, the Palas of Bengal, and the Rashtrakutas of Manikhata was continuously happening for 2.5 centuries. And it practically exhausted the power and economy of these three big dynasties. And if you see, Pratihars who were ruling from the central India, Kannauj, had lost most of the defense forts to Rashtrakutas, and even their feudatories were now breaking up into carving a niche for themselves as independent rulers. So one of them were the Chandelas of Jajakabhuti, the Chahmanas of Sakambari, the Parmars of Dhar. So we see many great powers were coming into being during this time. And then it witnessed the rise of another strong power also in the central India, was the Kalachuris of Tripuri. So this was the favorable time for Mula Raja, the founder of the Solanki dynasty, to establish his rule in 941 AD. If you see the literary sources, there are many inscriptions. I've given you the map. We have some in Rajasthan and very few in Malwa region, but most of them are found from Gujarat. And this is the Vadnagar Prasasti of Kumarapal and other very important, which gives information regarding the history of this period. We have also the literary sources of very good laureates who were residing in the courts of and patronized by the kings of the Solanki dynasty. If you see the origin, how did that happen? How did they took over their kingdom? It was according to Kumarapala Charita, Raji, he was one of the ministers in the court of Pratihars. And as the Pratihara dynasty disintegrated, he who was married to the Chapotakas came back along with his family to reside here. And as Mula Raja grew, he took advantage of the situation and killed his maternal uncle and established his rule over in Gujarat. And this Chaluk family was from Kshatriya clan. They were named as Chaulukyas, Chulukas, Chaulikas, and they moved to Gujarat permanently from Kanyakubja, that is Kannauj. And Chulukas means, that is in Sanskrit, the water pot of Brahma. So they claim themselves that they are born from the water pot of Brahma. And even the Bardic tales of the Chahmana dynasty, Chauhan dynasty, tells that they were born from Agnikula. So the Chalukyas of Anhilwada or Anhil Patana or Solankis, they are popularly known as ruled over Gujarat and Kathiawar for nearly 3.5 centuries, 950 to 1300 AD. They consolidated the Chalukya authority over Gujarat, and they they defeated all these. They took over all these chief kingdoms like Sandhavas, Jaithwas, Charvadas, Chapotakas, and Vaghelas. So here I've put a genealogy of the Solanki dynasty. So Mula Raja was the founder. He was followed by Chamunda Raja, Durlava Raja, who ruled for a very short period. And then his Durlava Raja's nephew came to power. From here, from Bhimavan, we see the rise of their power happening, their prestige. They reached their pinnacle during the time of Jayasimha Siddharaja and even Kumarapala. Then it started declining slowly during the time of Mula Raja and Bhima too. So if you see the map of like the dynastic map of this during the Solanki period, I'm not coming to that. I'm showing you this because this is very important. Solankis were immediate neighbors of the Parmar of Dhars. And then they were the Chandelas, and here are the Kalachuris, whom I've mentioned already. And the Yadavas came a little later in the end of their rule. So Solankis and Parmars were constantly, at war till the end, and they lost their empire finally to the Parmars, the Parmars, and then the Vaghelas took over. So you will see when I tell you about the little bit of the historic data of the kings, you will see that they were either taking over Malwa or they were able to get back Malwa. So this was constantly going on between the Solankis and the Parmars. And here, this is the Chalukya dynasty. The Anhil Pataka is North Gujarat, and they had conquered sometime in Mula Raja's time till Jodhpur, and even during the Siddharaja Jayasimha's time till the Parmar kingdom was taken over. So Mula Raja I, he's the founder. As I told you, he seized the throne from Chapotakas, from his maternal uncle, and nished out an independent kingdom with a capital at Anhil Pataka. Now, today, in modern times, it is called as Patan. And he conquered most of the chiefs, like the Abhiras of Saurashtra, the Lakha of Kutch, the Barappa of the South Gujarat, that is Lata. And later he had a treaty with Vigra Raja, that is the Chahmanas of Sakambari. And then he got his extension by defeating these smaller chieftains till Jodhpur. And finally, at the end, almost at the end of his reign, he had to face defeat at the hands of Parmara king Munja. And then Mula Raja had to give back the Marwar, withdrew to Marwar. So he was a follower of Shaivism, and he built 2 temples and abdicated the throne in favor of his son. So his son was Chamunda Raja, who defended the kingdom against the invasion of Parmar's Sindhu Raja. But later it ended in 1000, very few years he ruled, and he also had a marriage alliance with the Chahmanas of Sakambari. And his second son took over the throne, that is Durlava Raja. And since he was childless, so he gave the kingdom to his nephew, that is Bhima Deva I. So Bhima Deva I, as he took over the throne, his kingdom was invaded by Muhammad of Ghazni. Everybody, he's very famous personality who invaded into India in 1000 AD. And he had heard of Somnath's richness so much that he had to invade it many times to carry back the treasure. So in this course of time, Bhima went into exile, fled to Kanthan Court in Kutch. And after he retreated, Muhammad of Ghazni retreated, that time he was able to get back some of the territories, like he reconquered Mount Abu, Bhinmal in Rajasthan. And while he was in campaign with the Raja of Sindh, Anhil Pataka, that is his capital, was ransacked by Kula Chandra, that is the Parmara Bhoja's general. So what he did was he made an alliance with Kalachuris, that is Karnadeva. And he asked him to, invade from the east, and he will invade from the west. But in this process, Bhoja of Parmara died. And after everything got over, he went into fight with Karnadeva, who had helped him earlier, and defeated him. So during his reign, his minister Vimala built the Mount Abu temple, Dilwara temple of Mount Abu, and he abdicated the throne for his son in 1064 CE. So his son was Karna, who could not achieve much substantial way, but he conquered Malwa again and defeated by defeating Parmara Jaisimha. And he was again at the end. See, I was telling you about the seesaw struggle between the Parmas and the Solankis. So again, he was defeated by Parmara Udayaditya and his minister Jagadeva. And again, he invaded Marwar and was that time he was defeated by the Chauhans of Prithvipala of Nandol. When he was on his way to Marwar, he was defeated by the Nandol, that is another group of principality of the Chahmanas, another group of branch. Finally, he founded the city of Karnavati, which is now known as Ahmedabad, and he married the Kadamba princess. Then his son came to power, and he was Siddharaj Jaisingh. Siddharaj Jaisingh, that time the power rose into too much of glory and prestige. He was coronated at a very young age, and he adopted the title of Siddharaja, that is Lord of being the undefeated kind of thing. And his name really, he was able to prove that during his lifetime. So he carried out many military campaigns for the territorial expansion, and he subdued the Chauhans of Sakambari, but he was very foresighted person, so he had a marriage alliance with the princess of the Chauhans of Sakambari to develop a kind of friendly relations with them, and then along with them he was able to defeat Arno Raja, that is the Chauhans of Nandol. So, and along with his father-in-law and others, like that is the Chauhans, he was able to defeat the Parmars of Malwa and assume the title of Avantinath. So he vanquished a large part of Malwa in 1137 and subdued the Chandelas of Bundelkhand also. And Jaisimha also vanquished Abhira chief in the Saurashtra region. And he extended. Now it was a glorious period for the Solankis, and he was able to extend his empire at till Jodhpur in the north, and in the east till Bhilsa, in the west Kutch, and he continued to rule over a very vast empire with power and prestige till 1143. And he completed the Rudra Mahadev Mahalaya temple, which was started by Mule Raja I at Siddhpur, and also built the Sahasra Linga Talav at Patan. He reconstructed the temple of Somnath. He was an ardent follower of Shaivism, and he reconstructed it. And his son Kumarapala, there are two sources, like, there are numerous Sanskrit and Prakrit language inscriptions, and the major inscription, Viraval inscription, speaks that he is Maheshwara Nripa Agarani, so who is the worshipper of Shiva. So even the Jain texts call him as he was an ardent worshipper of Somnath and Shiva, that is Shiva temple. He rebuilt the Somnath Patan according to one of the inscription, and elaborated with beautiful sculptures and expanded it also. He ruled for 3 decades, subdued a number of neighboring kings, including the Chahmanas of Nandol here, Arno Raja, and Silahara king Mallikarjuna. He annexed the Parmara territory of Malwa and defeating Ballala. So he being he was ardent, he was a Jain, he had a Jain scholar in his court, Hemachandra, and he became a disciple of him. So the Jain texts which are composed after his death says that he converted to Jainism and he brought about ahimsa in the kingdom. But his inscription are giving a contradictory this thing, that he was an ardent follower of Shaivism. So when he died, there was a struggle of power for power between his sister's sons and his brother's sons, and his brother's sons became victorious, and he was Ajaypal. He fought against the Chahmanas of Sakambari and compelled the Chauhan ruler Someshwara to pay tribute. And he also defeated the Guhila chief of Mewar. He died in 1176, and while he was fighting the war with the Parmara Vijayadeva. Then Mula Raja, during the when he came to power, he was a minor, so his mother acted as a regent and took over the empire. And during her this time, 1178, Ghori invaded Gujarat, and the army fought very bravely and defeated them at Mount Abu. And taking advantage of this situation, again they were invaded by the Parmara king, who freed all the Malwa region, which was earlier taken by Jaisimha Siddharaja. So Mula Raja died in 1178, and he was succeeded by his younger brother, Bhima II. Bhima II was a weakling, like he was not very great as his predecessors. And slowly the kingdom started disintegrating. There were disorders, there were internal disputes, there were civil wars, and the provincial governors were declaring themselves independent. And one of them were the Waghela chief, who were very loyal to him. Though they tried to save the kingdom, Arno Raja, who was a Waghela chief, but he died in one of the battles. And then his son, Lavana Prasad, was who took over the administration from his headquarters at Kaira, along with his two brothers, Tejapala and Vastupala, as ministers. So Lavana Prasad repulsed the invasion of the Yadavas, and then what he did, he entered into a treaty with the Yadavas, and both of them were able to root out the Parmas. So Bhima II assisted Mehers against the Muslims and pursued the till the vicinity of Ajmer. So during his death, he was in possession of Bharmar, Godwar in Jodhpur, and Dungarpur and Kathiawar, like whole of Gujarat, you can say. So after that, the Waghelas, the ministers of the Waghelas who became the king, and they took over the empire, and the Waghela dynasty came into being. Now, if we see the architecture, we will go into architecture. They were patron for over 3 centuries. Their architecture gave a impetus to beautiful, building of the temples, and there was a continuity and there was development of style. The construction of beautiful architecture, though it started in the post-Maitrak period, but we also see in the Maitrak and post-Maitrak period, there was a vigor and boldness in the execution of this architecture with artistic decor, which can be seen in Gop Temple, Rhoda Temple in North Gujarat. The North Gujarat temple are the products of indigenous school and cannot be derived from the Maitrak, because Maitraks were completely, situated. I mean, they had this thing in the Saurashtra. They were ruling over the Saurashtra region, and their feudatories were Sandhavas and Jethwas. So, but their temple architecture, which developed in the North Gujarat also, was far more superior and par excellence in appearance. So here we can see the Maitrak temple, that is the Gop temple, one of the earliest surviving temple of Gujarat, situated in a very high plinth, and it has a Phamsnakar Shikhar. This also has a Phamsnakar Shikhar. This is Son Kansari of the Sandhav period, also in the Saurashtra region, and there is only one Garbhagriha and situated on a high plinth. That's it. And then if you see the Solankis had many temple. They were over a period of 3 centuries. They built many temples, more than 100. And I have here taken some of the major temples which I'll be talking about. So if you see the Maru Gujarat, what is Maru Gujarat? Maru Gujarat is a blended formation of Maha Gujarat and Mahamaru. And these terms were coined by M.A. Dhati. He had done an excellent job in, distinguishing the temple architecture in the early phase, middle phase, and the later phase. So, what is Maha Gujarat? Maha Gujarat, the elevation in the early phase shows that it included Latina Shikhara, that is curvilinear Shikhar structure, pithas with rudimentary moldings, plain jangha, that is the body was, the walls were plain. There were projections with niches, but again, they were without any sculptures and very heavy Vedi Banda. And the mandap's halls were without any kind of, floral or any kind of sculptures or designs. And the pillars were there, of course. And the mandaps had Famsna Akar. So for the first time, we say that on the mandap, they started using Famsna Akar. Famsna is a stepped pyramidal roof. And the temple walls were plain, yet beautiful. And the middle phase, we see the development of medallions and detailed Ghata Pallava motif, which happened in the interiors, which we can see in the Rhoda Temple. And the last phase, if we see, there were refined carvings coming up in the Pitha region. And the floor plan was 3 anga, that is 3 kind of projections which was coming out, or dvivanga, or 2 times projections. And the door frames had delicate carving. And it's one of the example was, this is the early phase, as I was telling you, Mahavir Jain Temple, which is very plain, though they had little, little sculptures, but most of them are very plain. The Pitha is plain, the plinth is plain, the body has niches, but they are again plain. And the mandap here is kind of, very plain in structure. Wherein in the second phase, that is middle phase, this is the Rhoda Temple, which has a curvilinear shikhara, Latina's type of shikhar, and a small veranda kind of thing, and which was in the later time developed into a sort of mandap or veranda, you can say, and then there was this Garbhagriha. Then if we come to Mahamaru, now what is Mahamaru? Mahamaru is a style which is attributed to Gurjara Pratihara, especially Pratihara dynasty, which was seen in Rajasthan and Gujarat in 8th to 11th century CE. There were again, Dr. Dhaki has divided them in 3 phases. That is Bhumi Shikhara, Bhumi Shikhara, and that is fired superstructure, Sukhasana, antifix, and Panchashakha, 5 branded door frames were there. 5 branded door frames, which had many sculptures like, snake, one brand will be snake, human couples, foliage, ornamentation, and they had large and high molded platforms or jagati. And the main temple was without a pitha and with bold, bold moldings with niches on the walls of the Janga, that is the Janga, and usually plain except for the images of the Dikpala we can see. And it had open, and now from here onwards we see there was a detached Ranga Mandap, open hall we can say, semi-open hall with carved ceiling. So this is coming into being. And now the decorative motifs are many more, especially lotus foliage, kirtimukhas, heavenly dancers or musicians, flying hybrids, So the common was the angas, the rathas, the projections, which was used on the floor plans were rathas, and karnas were stressed corners, and the norm was trianga, dvianga, and this was the one of the late phase of Harshanatha temple. And if we see, and then in the middle phase, there was more of refinement, and the last phase was the door frames were very beautifully added. Now, if we go to Maru Gujarat feature is the blend of both these Mahamaru and Mahagurjara. And these temples were built in sandstone, especially, and later period, we see marble also, they were being used. And they are mainly found in Gujarat, especially, and also in Rajasthan from 9th century CE. They are highly ornated, beautifully sculptured temple. They and motifs depicting stories from the ancient literature, the epics such as Mahabharata and Ramayana, and the sculptural ornamentation had various deities, different deities, mythical figures, floral motifs, hybrid figures, decorative motifs. And they had now increasing number of projections, recesses, And Mandovara, that is the wall of the temple, was sharply carved with statues of different gods and goddesses, sometimes Surasundaris also in the niches. And pillars were arranged in such a way that in a circle it was arranged in a circle to uphold the central dome, and it formed a central nave, which were decorated with Ghata, Pallava, niches and sculptures. So, and the Pitha, which is the platform, was also had beautiful panels of musicians, dancers, kirtimukhas, gajathara, narathara, ashvathara, which is very rare though, but it was exquisitely carved with ornamentation and lots of filigree, ilaka. So this is the moldings of the Pitha. The Pitha, the temple elevation is divided into 3 parts. The Pitha moldings are namely the lowest part has 7 parts, and the elevation is divided into 3 parts. That is Pitha, the Mandovara, the wall, and the Shikhar, which are again subdivided into many bands according to the moldings. So here is the door frame. The Dwaraksha is faceted into odd numbers. The lintel is carved with divinities, while the door still has a semicircular projection in center with a creeper on its sides. Could be these are the on the sides. It is not very clear here, but there are kirtimukhas on these sides. And again, the Mandovara is divided into 3 parts: Vedi Bhanga. Vedivanga again, they are again subdivided. So we have many types of moldings which are subdivided, which are fully ornamented, which differ from the Ranga Mandap because these are situated on the main body of the temple. And in case of Ranga Mandap, that is the separate Mandap or Sabha Mandap, we can see the depiction of, as I told you, the literature, ancient literature, the epics, and dwarf pillars have floral medallions, Ghata Pallava motifs, geometric patterns, and so on. So if we see the Shikhar, it started with the Latina Shikhar. It is simple and most common type of Shikhar, with a square at the base, and this is a Latina Shikhar, square at the base, and the walls are curved or sloped inwards to a point, which point to a top with a amlaka and a finial, that is a ghata and a flag. So Latina types are mainly used for housing the Garbhagriha. Later on, Latina buildings grew into complex architectural styles. Instead of appearing in a single tower, they now have, the temple began to support many small towers, which were clustered together and rising like mountains, and mountain type, with the tallest one being in the center. So this is in the center. So this is Shekhari style, and they are broader and shorter than Latina. And their roofs are composed of several slabs that gently rise to single point over the center of the building. So, and then we have the Bhumij style. Bhumij style has rows and columns of small shikhars, and this also became common in other parts of, in the central India especially. And Hamsla Akar shikhar was mainly put on the Sabha Mandap. So this is the plan of the temple. This is the Mool Prasad or the Garbhagriha, or and then the attached was the Guha Mandap, which was attached to the Garbhagriha, and it was again a pillared hall. It was all set up on a big plinth, and then there is a stairways which goes down, and again the Sabha Mandap or Nata Mandap, which was again you have to go by a step of stairs, and you can see from the 4 sides it is open, and there are open balconies out here, and 2 sides, 4 sides are open, and the pillars are arranged in such a way that the centrally it forms a circle, and that this is a nave in between in the form of a plus or cross. And it is angular with multiple rathas on each face, The maximum number of this projection is 5, and in the Maru Gujarat temples have Pancharatha, which is in Gujarat it is very rare though. Mainly it is Dvi-Ratha and Tri-Ratha. And Mula Prasada and Mandap of a temple have the same Ratha in different proportion. And this is a plan, this is the very beautiful plan of the Sun Temple of Modera. It has a tank also, you can see, which I'll be talking about it later. There are different styles of temple, like, you know, small temples only have Pradakshina Path, which is only one, which is open, and large temples have covered Pradakshina Patha, like the Sun Temple of Modera. And generally, Garbhagriha and Mandapa are there. Mainly, Garbhagriha and Mandapa will be there, which are attached. And sometimes multiple Mandapa also could be seen mainly in the Jain temples, which was of a later development. And rarely we have Panchayatana style. And this particular temple of Jasmal Nathji temple at Asod is having a Panchayatna style. And this, you can see the Toran which is broken, and another Toran here which is again broken. So, and this is the Vishnu temple with one open, you know, Pradakshina Path. And now if we come to pillars, so the pillars are, you know, beautifully carved pillars. This is one of the pillars of Mount Abu, and I will be, dated to 11th century CE. If you see the pillars at a very closer angle, base is octagonal or round. Then it has got many panels with either Kurtimukha or dancing figures or just geometrical figures. Then the shaft is round, which has again the stories of Mahabharata and Ramayana, and also beautifully carved mythical stories and literary stories. And on the top, it is circle, having lots many niches. Sometimes it has got these Kirtimukhas on the top, or Bharvahas on the top, who are holding the temple. And here you can see that how the central nave is holding, supporting the circular roof of the mandap. This is the Sabha Mandap. So interior carving of the Sabha Mandap, each intricately carved and all around the pillars. Then these are the lotus petaled of the some of the temple roof. And this is typically of the Ranakpur temple of all the Surasundaris around it, and of Ranakpur temple. So temples, there are more than 100 temples constructed during this time of the Solanki period, and 50 of them have national and state importance, like ASI is taking care of them. And I've given a list of so many temples that, and many of them are lying in ruins. We don't have many temples standing, but which are standing, it is really beautifully carved, and one can see the beautiful architecture of bygone era of Gujarat. So this is, I'm started with Modera Sun Temple. It's one of its kind, on one of its beauty. It is considered to be the heritage, World Heritage Site. And Modera is situated in the Mehsana district. Is a Sun Temple located on the bank of Pushpavati River. The Modera was constructed by under Bhimavan in 11th century CE. Then the temple complex, as I showed you earlier, is divided into 3: Guha Mandap, Sanctum Hall, and the Sabha Mandap. And there is a kund here. And you can see as the receding steps, there are smaller shrines on each of the steps, which has smaller figures of idols of gods and goddesses. And the temple complex is mentioned also in the ancient scriptures like Skanda Purana and Brahma Purana also. And the temple is designed in such a way that during equinox, the first ray of the rising sun would fall on a diamond placed on the head of the sun god. Now the idol is missing, and this would have lighted up the whole shrine with a golden glow. And the Sabha Mandap has 52 pillars, signifying 52 weeks in a year, and the carving of the sun on the wall, it shows that there might have been unity with air, water, earth, and space. So I'll be going through the sculpture, the parts of the temple of, and here you can see, this is the here as you come down here, this tank is kunda is there. As you go up the kund, here is the toran. The toran is broken. The top of part of the toran is broken. This is the sabha or natamandapa, which had famsna akar roof. And here there might have been a curvilinear shikhara on the Garbhagriha. So which is missing. As you know, it was demolished during the invasion of the Muslim era. So this is the Natamandapa or Sabha Mandapa. This is the east and west, and this is the this is the north and south, and this is the east and west facing. And this is the whole temple is situated seated on a high plinth. So you can see it. This is the entrance of the Guda Mandapa and the sanctum. This is the entry of there are two pillars and two pilasters which is holding the temple, the roof of the temple. And this is another view of from the kund of the temple. Okay, these are the this is the Sabha Mandap, and this is the Sabha Mandap, and this you can see the entry towards the Guha Mandap. So these are the pillars, very beautifully carved. You can see the every carving is different from others. It narrates the story of Ramayana here. So, and you can see the bharvahas on top, like, you know, holding the roof. It is in a circular form. And the shaft is of 16-sided shaft with niches, which has beautiful carvings. So this is the nave, as I was telling you, of east and north and south direction of the Sabha Mandap. And these two this is the arch toran in carved out, which is holding this roof. And we here too, most of the temples of Solanki also has this erotic sculptures, which I've shown just one, like, you know, most of the temples of the Gujarat Solanki period has this. And these are some of the temples on the plinth, the sculptures on the plinth. This is Gajathara, then dancing, hunting scenes and dancing a woman, and then, and dancing girls and all. And this is a hunting scene again. And this is the roof of the temple, the Sabha Mandap actually. And if you come to Shamlaji is situated again in North Gujarat. The present temple of Shamlaji is dedicated to Vishnu, and may perhaps have started in 11th century CE in Solanki style, but the present structure dates to 15th and 16th century. Here you can see this is a completely different style with two stories, which is of Vaghela period. The stylized of this is a Vaghela sort of architecture, which has roofs on the Mahamandap, which is attached to the Garbhagriha. But if you see the walls of the sculptures and others, you can see beautifully carved out panels of human and Gajathara, Narathara, very typical to that of, and even the filigree work you can see on top, which is typical of Maru Gujarat style. But this is a development of the Maru Gujarat style in the 15th, 16th century. And this is, so these are some of the sculptures on the wall panels. This is Brahma. This is the Marichika, killing of Marichika. This is Krishna killing Naga and Kalia and all. And so these are some of the sculptures. So if you come to Rudra Mahadev temple, this temple is and yes, and in this we have behind is a Pratyahara temple, which is known as Harish Chandrani Chauri Temple, with a gateway nearby it. And this could have been a temple complex, because here we see not only the temple of Vishnu, but many other temples which are found nearby. And there is one Shiva temple just in front of the Vishnu temple. And if one goes for exploration, they find many stylize of the temple of the early period, like the Guptas also, and Maitraks also, and of the later period, like Vaghilas and Pratihas also. So, you know, that could have been a style of architecture, a style of architecture, we can say, we don't know yet. So, if you see this Rudra Mahalaya temple, also known as Rudra Mahal temple, was destroyed, and it is situated in the temple complex at Siddhpur in Patan district. It was constructed by Mula Raja and completed by Siddharaj Jai Singh. And the temple was first destroyed by Alauddin Khilji, and then by Ahmed Shah I, who was the Sultan of Gujarat. And substantially it was demolished. They tried to demolish it and convert it into a mosque. Two torans are lying here, like they are there, and 4 pillars which form the central structure still stand along on the western part of the complex. And it is now in the state of, it is a kind of a disputed area between the ASI and the local people. You can see the temple here. There is this, they were building a mosque out here. You can see the white part of it. And then it was stopped because the court has taken it up. And so nobody is allowed inside. So this is a beautiful temple which has a the mandap which is here, and it was extended mandap. And here in front could have been the Guha Mandapa, and this is the sanctum where still the sculpture of Shiva is there. And these are the some of the, these two are the torans which are still standing, which is of two stories. Could have been built at a later period of time also, could be. Then this is the temple of Galteshwar, which is situated in Kheda district at the confluence of Mahi and Galteshwar in the Sarnal village of Kheda. And the Garbhagriha has a Bhumid style which was broken and reconstructed by the ASI. And there are 40 pillars inside. It has got dwarf pillars, you can see here. And typical, the walls of the temple have been carved with various gods, Gandharvas, human, rishis, horse riders, elephant riders, chariot riders, and every part of human life. So this is a ASI protected temple. You can see, and you can see the difference of color. This is the earlier one which was broken and then reconstructed by the ASI. So this is the Shiva Mandir, and it is lying in ruins, and it is again in Kheda district. It belongs to 10th century, which is again the Garbhagriha and the Mandapa we can see in front, which is broken, which is lying in ruins. And this is another beautiful temple, Bhavka temple, which was built during the reign of Bhima II. It was destroyed by Muhammad of Ghazni. Again, it is a Panchayatna plan, but all of them are in ruins. Only you can see the mandap. This is the Garbhagriha. The spire also, the Shikhara also has broken. The mandap walls and the door walls are still in situ. And it also has lots of erotic sculptures. So this is the Somnath Temple. Now, this was constructed, we don't know, like, you know, it was constructed in the early centuries of Christian era. It was rebuilt during the Maitrak period 3 times. It was reconstructed by the Pratihars when they were ruling over Gujarat by Nagabhatta. Then when the Parmas came into being, they repaired it again. And under Solanki, Bhimadeva I, he reconstructed it again. And again, it was destroyed by Muhammad of Ghazni in 1026 during the time of Bhimadeva. And it was rebuilt by Kumarapala and in 1169. And when there was archaeological investigation which happened, archaeological excavation happened, they revealed 3-story structure between the modern structure. So the temple Shikhara is 15 meters height, that is 49 feet, and height of the sanctum. And it has a flagpole on the top also. But this is a modern construction of the temple. And if you see the Dwarka temple, the main shrine is a 5-storied building, which is of a very later period after the Solankis. But initially it was started by the Solanki period, because it is the style of, they are following the Maru Gujarat style. And the original structure was destroyed by Muhammad Begra in 1472. And consequently, it was rebuilt in 15th to 16th century. And later, lastly, it was built in 19th century. Again, it was repaired and rebuilt. So Toran, if you are coming to, so Torans are freestanding ornamental archways for ceremonial purposes. They were built with red sandstone. It was a prominent feature of the temples of Gujarat, and it was a gateway, not only gateway of the temples, it might have been gateway to the cities, to the trade centers, or like the Vadnagar gateway. Torans are just lying, standing in middle of nowhere on a very high plinth. It could be a place of social gathering. It could be a place of entrance of the city. So there are temple complex is always fronted by an arched gate, which is called as Toran. And maybe it could have been, imitation of earlier wooden architecture. And it is classified under civic architecture. And the plinth is very simple, but the decoration of the whole pillar is beautiful with Padmakani, Kirtimukhas, Gajathara, Narathara, Kumbhi, and each side of the pillar has a different richly carved canopy also. And these are octagonal bands, are corbelled projections which support the standing figure of the inside and outside of the pillar. So this is, and each pillar are freestanding, basement with moldings, and the columns are tall and graceful and richly, I told you. And so these are the Torans of Gujarat, many Torans. These are some of the famous ones in Gujarat, Torans. So these are the Torans of Delmal, which has an arched corbel supporting two of these Torans. And that is, this is a later built, you can see this. And this is, I showed you, this is Rudramal temple. This is Kapat Vanch, which is very simple, of the earlier phase of Maru Gujarat style. Then this is of Vadnagar, which are freestanding two Torans, beautifully carved sculptures all over. The plinth is plain, as I told you, but sculptures is on from the shaft onwards. This is Piludra. And this Toran is not very much, strong, but it was a gateway of the Sun Temple. And the temple has been destroyed, and they are all lying in derbies around it. And the pillar is profusely carved and are now, not in a good shape. And this I showed you. This is the Asoda temple, which is again the top part is broken. It is a small village, and it is. The temple is an example belonging to Panchayatana class and has subsidiary shrines. And it is very much similar to that of Temple of Modera, Sun Temple of Modera. So this is the Sun Temple of Modera, which has beautiful sculptures. The Toran of the Sun Temple, which is broken from the top and beautifully carved from down. And these are some other civic, these are the fort, which was initiated by Siddharaj Jaisingh and then again rebuilt by the Vaghelas. So it has, the gateways of these forts are beautifully carved, multi-layered carved corbelled bracket resting on pillars. So you can see this, it is highly sculptured figures are there. So these are some of the walls of those forts. Again, there are panels with beautiful sculptures of different human forms, dancers, musicians, gods, goddesses, and others. So this is another fort built by Siddharaj Jaisingh, Jinjhuwada. And kunds and bhavs. So Solankis were known to have built many water resources. Kundas, well known for Mansoor Talab, Sahasralinga by Jaisingh, Siddharaja Jaisingh, Malav Talab at Dholka. And then we have these bhavs, which I'll be talking about. So this is Mansoor Talab. What is uniqueness about this Talab? Talab is kund constructed by Meenal Devi, queen of Siddharaj Jaisingh. There are 300 temples surrounding this kund. And these temples have each has idols inside it, which are still being worshipped, and they are, properly kept by the Archaeology Survey of India. And this is again a unique Sahasralinga tank or talav of Patan, very near to Rani Ki Vav, Vav. This has got this is in oval shape, and it has filter process, two filter process on both the sides. It was channeled to attach to the Saraswati river, could have the water have come, and they were cleaning out the dirty water, and all the channels you can see around are the smaller channels which were protecting, which was giving a clear cut water to the city. So this is the Rani Ki Vav, and again it was built by Queen Udaymati, daughter of Khengra of Saurashtra, and she built it in the memory of her husband Bhima Deva one in 11th century CE. According to Prabhada Chintamani, the stepwell was commissioned in 1063 and was completed after 20 years. And it was classified as Nanda. This is the Kuma. So it's a Nanda type of stepwell. It measures about 213 feet long and 92 feet deep. The fourth level is the deepest and leads into a rectangular tank inside, and the entrance is located on the east. So this is the east, and the well is located at the west. And the step well is divided into 7 levels of stairs, which leads down to a deep circular well. And there is stepped corridors. Here you can see these corridors, stepped corridors in compartmentalized at regular intervals with pillared pavilions. These are the pillared pavilions. And the walls, pillars, columns, brackets, beams are ornamented with carvings. And then on the side of the walls, if you want, these are the side of the walls. As you are going down, you can see beautifully ornamented with delicate figures, deities, Dashavatar figures, and sculptures. And there are around 212 sculptures in the stepwell on both the sides. And the stepped corridor is compartmentalized at regular intervals with pillared multi-story pavilions, that is kutas, and open spaces, that is anganas. And the kutas support, these are the kutas which support the side walls, could have been used for pilgrims for resting purposes. And the walls, pillars, common beams are ornamented. And the rear side of the temple, I will show you that. These are the filigree work on top of these sculptured panels. And these filigree works, the jali works, are now adopted by the weavers of the Patan, who weaves the patola silk, which is very costly these days. And the rear wall, if you see the vertical well, has sculpture of Sheshashai Vishnu. So this is now the tourists are not allowed to go. Nobody is allowed to go because this is not in a very, this is in a good shape. And this, you can see the sculpture all around till the down. And this photograph has been taken from down to up. And Sheshashai Vishnu is there in all the level. One level, this is 1 level, 2 level, 3 level. So 4 levels they are there. So as the water recedes, you can see in all the levels. And as water comes up, you can see on the top, like one part of the Sheshashai Vishnu you can see. So it is very uniquely built. Over 200 life-size sculptures of Surasundaris in beautiful play. So this is Parvati in penance, which again, every sculpture of God has smaller sculptures of gods and goddesses, and supported by 2 Surasundaris always. So here is Ganesh with consort. Again, there are 2 Surasundaris. So like that it is built. So sometimes they are applying makeup, wearing ornaments. Then there are beautifully they are educating themselves. So you can see different ways. So this is the sculpture of Kalki. I've cut down the Surasundaris out here. This is Varaha, Bhairavi. So these are all on the sides of the walls as you go down in the Vav. So these are the different Sudasundaris who are in different poses. You can see that. So here the Modera temple has another vow. This is very simple. And Shamlaji also has a vow, which is Nanda vow, which is one story down. You can see it. It could have been like it is covered, and it could have been a place of gathering or talking. And then another very immediate feature of the Solanki sculpture is the Jains. Now, Jains received Chalukyan patronization from the time of Mula Raja I, and even during the time of the later kings like Chamunda Raja and Kumarapala and others. So during the reign of Durlava Raja, Bhima I, the famous Neminath temple of Mount Abu was built by his ministers. So most of the ministers, they were of Jains, and Shvetambara doctrine became legal during the Jain during this time of Gujarat. Then Kumarpala built many temples, and Jalore inscription record that he was enlightened by Hemchandra, and he built a temple containing the image of Parshvanatha in 1221. So there are many temples which are built at Hemchandra, where Hemchandra was born, like Shaliga, Vasika, and other temples was Jholika Vihara. So Kumarpala is said to have erected, we don't know, like the Jain text talks that he erected around 1,440 temples, which none of them are surviving till today. But we have the beautiful Jain temples of Shatrunjaya, that is Palitana, and Girnar Hills, which was built by, still has Kumara Viharas in them. So the Jain temples, the famous ones are Ajit Nath Temple, Palitana groups of temple, Girnar Temple, Bhimala Temple, and Bhadreshwar Temple. So they are built all in Maru. That's why I'm showing it, because they were all built during this period, and they are of Maru Gujarat style only. But these are the famous Jain pilgrims. You have the mandap, which is attached to the Garbhagriha. Here also we have a small veranda kind of thing, and which is attached to the mandap and the Garbhagriha. So Kumarpala time, these temples were built. And then this is the Palitana or Shatrunjaya temple, which has many shrines around them, and also many, this is dedicated to Parshvanath. This is located on a huge hillock built in 11th century CE. And these are the Girnar group of temples dedicated to Neknath. And they were all built by, if you think who built them, it was the governors who were or the ministers who were followers of Jainism, and they were the traders also. They were trading in many things. So they were the ministers of these kings, and they were the one who built most of these Jain temples. And this is Bhadreshwar temple of Kutch, and built by Vastupal. After Kumarpal, Vastupal was the one governor or minister who built it. It has got 19th Tirthankara enshrined into the inside the shrines. So, and this is the famous Vimala temple or Mount Abu Delwara temple of Rajasthan, Neminath temple, which has beautiful sculptures on top. And this is the nave of the mandap, and it was built by Tejapal for increasing religious merit of his wife. This was added and all. So there are 32 inscriptions of this temple, and 3 relate to the erection of main temple in 1297 CE. So we come to the conclusion that, or discussion, the architecture during this period was unique in number of years, because this was a period we could see innovations and experiments. The era arched by penchant for perfection and beauty. The artisans of this period benefited from number of sources of the architectural style, like the Vidhan of the architecture, and not a single crevice can be found empty. Like they have filled up each and every gap of the temple and the pillars with some sculptures or other. So the visitors not only see the idol in the shrine, but also could see the reflection of the erstwhile society of that time. It has dancers, celestial maidens, monks, demigods, mythical beings, kichaks, which are found in abundance, and the architecture could compass all the four aspects of life if you see the dharma, artha, kama, and moksha. So even, and they not only patronized, they were not only worshippers of Shaivism and Vaishnavism. These were the two main, obviously there were two main dominant sects, but they were giving importance to the Shakti traditions also, because in Shamlaji we have found lot many Matrika figures and even Mahishasura Mardini's figures all over lying around in the temple. So some of the unique idols include Parvati in penance, Mahishasura Mardini, Sheshashai Vishnu at Queen's Temple, girls getting education, coronation of a king, a Jain monk delivering lecture, and classical forms of dance at the Sun Temple. So lesser known temples, Solanki era structure, including Rudramal, Mahalaya Temple at Sidhpur, and temples of Ajak were also we can find, and many of the temples which are in the North Gujarat or in Mehsana district also gives us the legacy of the era which has been preserved throughout the centuries. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Sen. There's so much to discuss, and there are a few questions, and I would like to maybe take just about 10 minutes to bring up some of these questions. Now, you said this particular dynasty, the Solankis, built around 100 plus temples. Right? How many of them are fully intact now?
Very few. Very few can be counted also, because you know, if I'm saying 100 more, because the inscriptions and even the text are talking about them, but they are all lying in ruins. Like, you know, we do get parts of the temple, like even Patan. If you go to, some years before, when I was approaching Rani Ki Vav, I saw plinth of Latina Shikhar were lying, and the plinth part was lying on the side of the roads, you know. So it is, and some of them were taken, like have taken for building in the house of the villagers, or maybe they have taken it as a local deity and started worshipping it, you know. So most of them are lying in ruins. We know that they are there. Even if you go to Shamlaji, and one of my students is doing research like exploration in the Shamlaji area, and he is finding many temples, smaller ones, which are completely ruined and broken. Only the plinth part, or only the the bricks or the stones are lying around, or the plinth is lying around, or some part of Latina is lying around, you know. So could have been many temples out there. So we get the intact ones which I had told you, and many more are there which I have not covered, because those are similar ones with the single Garbhagriha and the Mandapa, which are there in Saurashtra region also, and in Mehsana also, and in Kutch also. There are many more temples.
So the next is a follow-up question. How many of them, if they are even reasonably intact, are actually in worship today? In active worship?
Shamlaji is worshipped. Somnath is worshipped.
I'm looking more at numbers, like, you know, percentages.
Percentage. I won't be, because there are smaller temples also in Saurashtra region where when we went, they are worshipped. Many of them were worshipped. We can say when it is looked after by the ASI and state government, they are, you know, kind of taken over. But many of them are worshipped now, like which are still standing in situ.
Especially if it is right in the middle of you know, community.
Yes.
Then that, you know, for worship to happen, you need an active community.
Yes. Yes.
So if it is a little bit off, it's in the middle of nowhere, then you are not going to have worship.
That is very true. That is very true.
You know, the only other related follow-up question is,
yes,
this is something that you know, Professor Swaminathan of Tamil Heritage Trust keeps pointing out. Now, today in Tamil Nadu, if a new temple has to be built, right, and it happens every day, new temples are being built. Now, any temple that is built, however small it is, in a corner for Vinayaka or for any of the mother goddess, the pattern followed is exact Dravida architecture, the Tamil Nadu's Dravida architecture. There is no variation. I mean, it has the basis Adhisthana, the Bitti, everything is as per what we see in a Chola period or a Pandya period. We just go back in 1500 years, the Pallava period. That's the temple with, of course, the material may be newer material, there will be painting, there will be cement and concrete as opposed to, the older material. Now, if a new temple is being built in the Marugurjara region, let's say, what is the style they are following today? If a local temple is being built there.
Sorry, sir, I lost my some point of internet. Can you repeat the question again?
Yeah. So I'm saying, typically in Tamil Nadu, if a new temple is being built, that temple will follow the the tradition of the nearly 1500 years of extant temples. Now, what is it like in the Gujarat region? If a new temple has to be built today, okay, what is the style that is being followed?
No, each period, like, we too had in the modern period, like in Baroda, if I talk about the Baroda district, there were the kings who were ruling there, but, they are following the pattern. The mandap is there, there is the Garbhagriha is there, and there is small porch is there. If they don't want to spend much on the temple, they have these basic things are there. But they want to if the community is paying for a bigger project of a temple, so they have a bigger mandap, but not a Sabha mandap, which was separate. During the Solanki period, they are not building as elaborate, but there are no sculptures, there are no beautification on the pillars or something like that. But they are making them stand like the mandap is there, the Garbhagriha is there, the mandap is sometimes open, sometimes closed, and they are following the pattern.
Okay. So there are a couple of questions on the material used from Prema Sitaram. It says, was the Modera temple made of sandstone?
Yes, red sandstone.
Okay.
Because why red sandstone was easily available. Gujarat has these, it's in the periphery of the Aravalli Hills, which provides this red sandstone. And most of the temples were built of that only.
Okay.
And,
yeah.
Yes.
Please go ahead.
No.
Take something.
Sorry.
Okay. The second question also from her is, what is the material of the Mount Abu Jain temples?
That is marble. As I told you earlier, that they see if you they might have been bringing this marble from somewhere from the UP Western UP sides, Saharanpur and all these areas, and they might be like kind of carrying it up in those Mount Abu, that is the highest point of Aravallis.
Right.
So could have, because Siddharth Jaisingh, he was the one who built it. So it is very intricately made temple. It's a huge, elaborate in pattern, huge temple with a huge Garbhagriha, with a huge mandapa, which is situated on a plinth, which is surrounded by smaller shrines, which is on the four sides. There are smaller shrines, which are again executively carved, and the shrine has a veranda, which again is supported by pillars.
Okay. Now, there comes the question related to that. Again from Prema, which is, Jainism being an austere religion, how is it that these temples have so much ornamentation?
See, they were the ministers of Siddhara, I mean, of all the kings of Solanki kings. So they didn't wanted to get away from the stylized of the kings or who were patronizing this temple architecture. They didn't wanted to, move away from that path. So they did build, but if you see Palitana, which is of the later period, it has numerous shrines, and they are putting extra shrines on the top of the shrines, on the mandap also different shrine, and they are building smaller temples also around it. So later on, they might have deviated when the kings were not very powerful, or they were not, giving much force to the, or they were not looking after the. They were much more busy in raging wars and all. So could be possible that during the time of Siddharaj Jaisingh and later Kumarapala, they are following the typical norm of the Maru Gujarats, right? But later on, they are kind of deviating, and they might have taken up their own stylize.
Yeah, but in a sense, the Jaina community was always trading, and they had considerable access to money. And if they had wanted, I mean, the only question is that the religion has austerity built into it. I mean, the sadhana, the process of achieving or dropping everything and going for nirvana, that is an austere process. But the community, the lay persons, were always making a lot of money, in a sense. And how do you show your love for your religion? By obviously building something which is ornate, right? So they are not necessarily at odds. I think a religion being austere and temple being very, very elaborate, in a sense, I think. So yeah, sorry, you want to add something there?
I just wanted to add that here you can see, sir, because there were numerous temples were coming up during this time, dedicated to Vaishnavism, Shaivism, even Shaktism and all. But when they were growing in power as community, because they were the governors, so they were also given power as community.
Right.
They started, kind of, you say, the prachar karna, like, they were trying to bring up their community in the main front. That is what happened today. Like we have a lot many Jain community in Gujarat, since they are traders, and so that is what they were. There was a kind of though they were the minister, but there was a sort of a competition inside. Like they want to be the best, or they want to be on the like they want to build the best of the temples, or they want to show the power in the society that okay, Jainism is one of the best thing around, one should follow that. So they were also like, though if you see Siddharaj Jaisingh's Kumarapala's inscription, the inscription are stating he's an ardent follower of Shaivism, but after some years, when the Jains started, after his death, when the Jains were writing their books, they are saying he was converted into, because he was patronizing, he was believing in Jainism. See, there is a difference between you are believing in Jainism and you are following Jainism. So he was believing in Jainism, and that's why Jainism grew into power during his time also. And he had his guru as Hemchandra. So could be possible that after his death, they were, kind of telling people that, see, he was the Jain, and he was the one who brought about ahimsa, and he was not allowing much, the religion norms should be put into the society and all. So that was happening there then. So could be possible that they were the one who kind of, the community was becoming stronger and stronger, and Vaghilas was one of them. So, could have patronized them too.
Yeah. A couple of, there is one question which I will sort of paraphrase. If you look at Tamil Nadu, Jainism sort of ran into a serious opposition with Shaivism and Vaishnavism. During the Bhakti movement in the Tamil kingdoms, there is a lot of anti-Jaina text in the sacred hymns of the Vaishnava and the Saiva saints, right? And over time, we see that there is a very small minority Jaina presence still there in Tamil Nadu, but almost insignificant compared to the amount of Jaina vestiges in terms of open air bas reliefs. There are few temples still extant, but there's a lot more of elements strewn all over, but not the Jainas themselves. The Jainas are very, very small population. But if you go to Gujarat and Rajasthan, that kind of tension does not seem to be there. I can't claim to be a very serious student of history that I have read so much to understand that, but that's a sort of a sense that I have. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yes. So it has to go back long time back, because if you see the coast of Gujarat, it has like from the ancient time or before that also, the traders were coming and settling down. And if you see the Kshatraps or the Indo-Scythians, the Indo-Greeks, the Indo-Parthians, later the Sasanians, or had come as a traders. And, they were minting lots of money. And it was for the first time, even the Gujaratis who were like in India, like if you can go out and you become lecha, like you cannot be, because you are eating other things outside and all, so you cannot come in, like you are eating cows or whatever it is, so you cannot be put into the same cadre with the villagers, and also you are separated out. But in Gujarat, we have those kind of kings who had accepted Indo-Scythians, who when became the kings, they were accepting Hinduism, they were accepting Buddhism, they were also that time there was no Jainism as such. But the people today also, if you see, they are very kind of modern outlook. They kind of adapt everything very open-mindedly. Though they might be following their religion within their four walls of their houses, but so there was a kind of a intermingling of different castes, and even when in the inscriptions of say Rudra Daman's Western Kshatrap, he's saying that he's even not only him, but also of Skandagupta, his ministers, he is saying that he's intermingling with other people, he's eating with them, he's open-minded and talking to them also, and calling them to his house and having inter-family relationship. So these things were very common in Western India, maybe because people are adapting to the and adopting the culture which was staying here, and the people who are coming also here, they are also doing the same thing. So there was a kind of a intermingling of caste, creed, and color here. So that was not a problem. So maybe this is the reason where like when there was Buddhism, see, even in Taranga Hills, we have a couple of when recent excavation of Vadnagar and other the ASI who was taking care, they have found many Buddhist dwellings out there on those hills.
Okay.
But in some of the hills where there is a figures of Buddha, they have painted it as the Jain Tirthankaras, with the eyes and all. So, what was happening? There was a change. Buddhism was not given patronage at that time. So now the scenario of during the Solanki period completely changed. Now, because they wanted the traders, they wanted the money, they were the rich people, they were going abroad and they were bringing in money. So when there was lot of trade happening, and they were the one who was providing it to the king, because they were constantly fighting wars with their neighbors, whether it is Chahmanas or the Parmaras or the Yadavas, and constantly they had also fear of foreigners also coming in, of the Arabs, especially the Arab merchants who are coming in. And
Right.
so they wanted a kind of financial, strength, a strong financial backup. So that is what the Jains were providing.
Okay. Just one last question.
Yeah.
Saravana Kumar wants to know if there are any references to South Indian cultural aspects in these temples, in the form of maybe a South Indian looking merchant or other characters depicted in statues, panels, anything that you can sort of think of, locate.
Okay, we don't have South Indian like of a thing, but we have a Western like of, the Kirtimukha themselves, the Kichaks or Kirtimukha. It is coming from the, one of my students is studying that, and it is coming from the Pazuzus of Mediterranean, this Mesopotamian region, so some typical character is coming there. So we have this thing, but I'm yet to study the South Indian features. I would love to have them, because that shows that there was even, I will tell you, there are, because the inscription of Guptas are telling about the people, the weavers or silk weavers were migrating to the south, so there is some, and the silk weavers were also coming, the merchants were coming to Gujarat. That is there in one of the inscriptions of, I think, Kumaragupta. So which shows that there was some kind of relationship in the early period. But I think during Solanki period, especially because there were many small kingdoms which were surrounding each other, and everybody was fighting among each other. And that was the reason the Arab invasion took place. Otherwise, if they were united like that of Guptas, the Kshatrabs, the Mauryas, it means there wouldn't have been any Arab invasion. They could have stopped it together. So since they were so many into, so many dynasties which were surrounding each other, and they were constantly fighting among each other. They were constantly backbiting, they were killing each other. So, the culture fell, I should say, at that time. But it was a different kind of beauty we can see in their temples, in their art, in their literature. Even medieval period, we can see all those, and we have inherited them.
Yeah, I wanted to talk a little more about the vows in particular, and the Rani Ki vow, but we have sort of run out of time. And for me, it was a magical moment. I had seen a bunch of presentations before visiting Rani Ki vow, and never really expected the kind of the structure that I finally ended up seeing. The immensity of it. I've seen very large temples, and I can sort of guess, okay, if I'm going to, say Kandariya Mahadeva temple of the Chandelas, I can sort of course, the architecture is different, but I can compare that with anything that I have seen in Tamil Nadu, for example. But the vow is something that never really seen. It's a well. It has some water in it. That's some minimal thinking. But it just turned out that it was much bigger than the biggest temples that you could even imagine. And filled with, and obviously it had to have its own architecture of steps that you have to keep going down, and it had to be sort of, supported. So there are layers and layers and stages and pillars and hundreds of sculptures. And this is only what is partially reconstructed, because it was completely covered under sand, and a lot of portions lost, right? But even what was left, what was sort of put back, is unbelievable. I don't think it can be presented in any kind of a presentation with some photographs, etc. One has to actually go visit in person, really get a sense of what you find there. And the study of the sculptures there probably will, if you are printing them in a book, will come to hundreds and hundreds of pages, right? It's an experience by itself, and I don't want to even ask questions, and I will be forced to then cut you out by saying, no, there is no time for it. So we may have to consider a separate lecture on Rani Ki Vav alone that deserves much more than that. So thanks a lot. Let me invite.
Thank you for inviting.
Yeah. Sure. Let me invite Kishore to get a closure to today's activities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I second what Badri said. Your presentation brought back fond memories of, for some of us here at Tamil Heritage Trust, your presentation brought back fond memories of a trip that some of us made to Gujarat in 2014. The Sun Temple at Modera, Rani Ki Vav, Sahasralinga Talav, and a few other sites. But obviously what we visited was it was a partial or a subset of what you took us through today. We did not visit, for example, Palitana or Shamlaji or Mount Abu or the Bhadreshwar Jaina temple that you spoke about. So yeah, very vast topic, and thank you once again for the excellent lecture.
Thank you both of you.
So with that, we come to an end for the day 3 program. Tomorrow, just like today, we have 4 lectures. We have 2 in the morning. We have Dr. Manoj Gundana talking us through the Hoysala architecture and their unique Vesara style temples. So from southern part of Karnataka, we then go to our second lecture where Dr. Fanikanta Mishra will deliver a lecture on the Chandelas. So we go to the central part of India, and then from there we travel eastwards where in the evening Dr. Sanjay Acharya will give us a lecture on the Eastern Gangas and the Kalinga architecture. So from the central part of India towards Orissa, and the concluding lecture for tomorrow, we come back to the central part of India where Dr. Shrikant Ganveer talks us through the Parmaras of Malwa and the Bhumija temples that they built. So thank you very much. Please continue to follow our YouTube channel, and please do participate in our lectures tomorrow. Thank you very much.